Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Mindy Morgenstern. Mindy Morgenstern was born on April 29, 1984, in Bogota, Colombia. She and her sister were adopted by Eunice and Larry Morgenstern, farmers from New Salem, North Dakota, USA. The couple already had a biological daughter named Rebecca, but they wanted a larger family. They adopted a boy named Michael and later a girl from Colombia named April. When they found out April had a younger sister, Mindy, they decided to adopt her as well. This completed their family of 4 children, with 3 being adopted. Mindy was the youngest. Growing up on the farm suited Mindy perfectly. She enjoyed horseback riding and playing basketball. She assisted her parents with farm work and was even skilled enough to drive a tractor. After high school, Mindy relocated to Valley City and became in college life. Her outgoing and cheerful personality helped her make friends quickly. She balanced her studies with a part-time job as a waitress at a local restaurant. Her future had looked promising, but now her plans and dreams were shattered. Mindy's friends, Tony Baumann and Danielle Holmstrom, became concerned when she failed to answer her cell phone and didn't return their calls on September 13, 2006. They decided to visit her apartment to check on her. Upon arrival, they noticed Mindy's car parked in a lot, and Tony went up to the second floor to knock on her door. When no one answered, Tony entered the unlocked apartment and found it dark in the house. After taking a few steps, she stumbled upon something on the floor. Turning on the light revealed the lifeless body of Mindy, with visible injuries on her neck. Tony was shocked and immediately ran outside to call Danielle, who was waiting in the car. The two of them re-entered the apartment, confused and trying to make sense of what they saw. Mindy's body showed signs of knife wounds on her neck, and an empty bottle of cleaning agent lay nearby. The strong smell of the cleaning agent filled the entire apartment. Danielle quickly called 911 to report the discovery of her friend's body. Hearing the noise, a neighbor living on the same floor decided to come check out what was happening. He walked up to Mindy, he checked for a pulse and, after a few moments, confirmed to Tony and Danielle that their friend was deceased. Soon after, the police arrived at Mindy's apartment and were immediately hit with the strong smell of cleaning agent. Upon entering, they found Mindy's body lying across the living room floor with a belt wrapped around her neck and a broken knife lodged in it. The handle of the knife was lying next to her. It was clear that the perpetrator had attempted to destroy evidence using the cleaning agent, but fortunately, some evidence remained. Forensic experts discovered skin particles under Mindy's left-hand fingernails, indicating that she had resisted and scratched her attacker. As investigators worked to determine the motive behind the attack, they quickly ruled out a robbery gone. Mindy's purse, phone, wallet, and cash were still clutched in her right hand, and her jewelry and other valuables were untouched. The scene suggested that Mindy had been attacked the moment she entered her apartment with a basket of clean laundry, which was found next to her body. There were no signs of forced entry on the front door. This suggests that the person who attacked Mindy may have known her, or they may have entered the apartment immediately after her. The following day, detectives faced the difficult task of informing Mindy's family of her passing. Her parents, brother, and sisters were devastated by the news. The family couldn't think of anyone who would want to harm Mindy, as she was well liked by everyone. Furthermore, none of her friends had any problems with the law. Tony and Danielle, friends of Mindy, told investigators that they were not the only people in the apartment. A neighbor from the same floor had entered Mindy's apartment after hearing their screams, checked her pulse, and confirmed that she was deceased. When questioned, the man claimed he had checked Mindy's pulse with the back of his hand to avoid leaving fingerprints on her wrist. Which investigators found suspicious. This man's name is Robert Lind, and he had several scratches on his hands, making him a suspect. The police took Robert to the station for questioning. However, after reviewing his background and discovering his history of run-ins with the law, the number of questions increased. The police asked about the scratches on his hands, which he claimed were work-related injuries, explaining that his job working with steel often resulted in such scratches. When questioned about his activities on the day of the incident, Robert reported being at work from 7 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. Robert's boss verified this information and added that employees working in the same industry as Robert often have scratches on their hands due to the nature of their work. Despite his alibi, investigators did not clear Robert as a suspect and requested he a DNA sample, which he agreed to provide. The sample was sent to the lab for comparison with DNA found under Mindy's fingernails. The police interviewed Mindy's friends but found no leads. Everyone reported that Mindy had no conflicts with anyone. While waiting for DNA results, investigators spoke with other neighbors, including Moe Gibbs, a corrections officer from the Barnes County Jail. Moe lived in the same building as Mindy and was familiar with the investigators, so they hoped he might have noticed something unusual. As a corrections officer, Moe was likely more observant than the average person. He was married with a stepchild and lived in the apartment next door to Mindy. When he came to the police station for questioning, he brought his child, so one of the police kept the child, while Moe answered questions. Moe reported serving in the Navy from 1990 to 1999. He was discharged after being convicted of assault, for which he served a prison sentence. Following his release, he had no further run-ins with the law. Before becoming a corrections officer, Moe worked as a college security guard. On the day before Mindy's death, Moe claimed to have worked a night shift. The next morning, he returned home and began loading boxes into his car in preparation for moving to a new apartment with his wife and stepdaughter. Moe stated that he didn't notice anything unusual, but he did notice a strong smell of cleaning agent. However, he didn't investigate the source of the smell due to being preoccupied with the move. Moe had scratches on his hands, which he attributed to injuring himself while carrying boxes. When questioned by police about whether he had ever been to Mindy's apartment, Moe replied that he had visited once to help Mindy carry a laundry basket. Investigators requested a DNA sample from Moe for comparison, and he agreed without hesitation. After providing the sample, he was allowed to leave. Investigators sought to speak with anyone who had a close relationship with Mindy. To do this, they visited the restaurant where she was employed and conducted interviews with her co-workers. During these conversations, they discovered that a particular individual had been making Mindy feel uneasy. This person, a regular at the restaurant, resided in a nearby trailer and frequently visited the establishment. His behavior was described as peculiar, and Mindy had expressed discomfort when he was around. The man in question was identified as Ralph. When questioned by the police, he denied any involvement in Mindy's death, claiming he had no knowledge of who she was. According to Ralph, he had never had any disputes with anyone at the restaurant. Although Ralph did not have an alibi, he willingly provided a DNA sample. The police then sent this sample to a laboratory for comparative analysis. Next, investigators spoke with Jordan Ram, Mindy's boyfriend of over a year. He and Mindy shared a similar background, both coming from local farming families, and had met at church. Jordan had a clean record and a good reputation in town. He appeared dedicated to Mindy, often taking her to his family's home to spend time together. However, Mindy's parents reported that Jordan would sometimes arrive unannounced at their farm, asking to see Mindy. They sensed he might be jealous, but didn't think he was capable of harming their daughter. Jordan went to the police station immediately after being asked to do so. He was cooperative and honest in his responses to the investigators' questions. According to Jordan, he had spent time with Mindy the day before her death, going shopping and visiting a video rental store together. The next day, Mindy called him at 10:45 a.m., which turned out to be the day of her death. What struck Jordan as unusual was that this was the only call they exchanged that day. Normally, Mindy would call him about 10 times a day, but on that day, there was only that one call, and when he tried to reach her later, she didn't answer. Jordan assumed she was busy and would call him back, but unfortunately, that never happened. Jordan also provided details about his activities at the time of Mindy's death, stating that he was working on his family's farm. The investigators requested a DNA sample and asked him to undergo a polygraph test, to which he agreed. However, during the polygraph test, Jordan was very nervous, so the test results were unclear. Despite this, the police released him, sent his DNA sample for analysis, and began verifying his alibi. Kyle Kia, Mindy's ex-boyfriend, who was also a potential suspect. They had broken up over a year before her death, but something unusual occurred after the breakup. Kyle met Mindy when she was a freshman. They dated for 2.5 years, during which time Kyle regularly visited Mindy's family farm. Her family adored him and treated him like one of their own. Mindy loved Kyle deeply and thought they would eventually get married. However, their relationship ultimately ended without a wedding. When questioned by investigators, Kyle shared the story of his time with Mindy. He recounts the story of how they first met and the intense attraction they feel from the very first moment. Kyle described their 2.5-year relationship as having ups and downs. Kyle and Mindy began arguing frequently. After completing his university studies, Kyle needed to move forward with his life, so he relocated to a new area about an hour's drive from Valley City. This move concerned Mindy, who feared Kyle might find someone else, as maintaining a long-distance relationship can be tough. According to Kyle, he chose to end the relationship due to these challenges. Following the breakup, Mindy made efforts to reconcile with Kyle, but he said he'd have started seeing another girl and subsequently ceased communication with Mindy. However, about 7 months before Mindy passed away, she went to Kyle's house to talk to him. Kyle insisted he had nothing to discuss and asked her to leave. The conversation ended, and Mindy becoming upset and departing, marking the last time they spoke to each other. Kyle's demeanor changed a few days after Mindy's death, as he sat in the interrogation room. He expressed regret over his actions and revealed that Mindy had been in contact with his father, Rodney Kia, which he found unusual. According to Mindy's friends, Rodney would call her multiple times a day, sometimes scaling back to just a few calls a week. Kyle believed his father had become overly attached to Mindy. At one point, Kyle asked his father to cease communication with Mindy. He also mentioned that his mother discovered the frequent calls and was upset, telling Rodney it was wrong given. Despite this, the Kyle family had a genuine affection for Mindy, and her communication with Rodney may have been a way for her to maintain a connection with Kyle. The police investigated Mindy's voicemail and discovered a message from Rodney, left after her death, in which he was crying and apologizing for what had happened. This close relationship between Rodney and Mindy raised suspicions, and the police called him in for questioning. The police asked Rodney about his attachment to Mindy, his son's 22-year-old ex-girlfriend. Rodney acknowledged it was unusual but explained that he grew fond of Mindy when she was dating his son, Kyle. He liked Mindy because she reminded him of his wife when his wife was young. Initially, they discussed Kyle, but soon their conversations and texts expanded to other topics, and even after his wife discovered their conversation, this continued. Rodney stated that he and Mindy spoke frequently, sometimes up to 20 times a week, with Mindy usually initiating the calls. He described their relationship as paternal, considering her like a daughter, and was shocked by her death. He left a voicemail message for investigators, wanting to talk to Mindy one last time. However, these emotional messages only increased suspicions about Rodney's intentions. Although investigators doubted a romantic relationship between Mindy and Rodney, they considered the possibility that he had become dangerously obsessed with her. Rodney gave his DNA to the police and told them he was working on his farm with his 2 sons from 7:30 a.m. until evening on the day in question. His family backed up his story, so the investigators let him go. The police then sent Rodney's DNA to a lab to compare it with skin particles found under the victim, Mindy's, fingernails. As the police continued their search for Mindy's killer, people in Valley City grew increasingly worried about their safety. Many people were too afraid to leave their homes because the person who killed Mindy was still at large. 6 days after Mindy's passing, her funeral was held. Due to the large number of people wanting to pay their respects, the service took place in the school gym instead of the church. Undercover police officers attended, keeping a discreet watch on the crowd for any suspicious behavior, as it was suspected that Mindy's killer might be in attendance there. The police had also asked attendees to take photos and videos of the crowd, hoping to capture any unusual behavior. However, this effort did not produce any leads. With no new suspects, the police were left waiting for the results of DNA tests from existing suspects. However, investigators uncovered a significant lead. Upon analyzing the DNA found under Mindy's fingernails and entering it into the federal database, they discovered a match from a 2-year-old case in Fargo, North Dakota, approximately 75 miles from Valley City. In this prior case, the attacker forced her to have sex with him. The DNA match revealed that the same person was responsible for both Mindy's murder and in the attack in Fargo. These things indicated that the individual was likely to continue committing crimes. The police were now under pressure to apprehend the suspect before another victim was harmed. Although they still didn't know the perpetrator's name, the relevance to the Fargo case provided a crucial lead in the investigation of Mindy's death. The police investigating Mindy's case met with a 22-year-old woman from Fargo who had been attacked in a previous case. The woman had planned to become a teacher and had been out with friends at a bar, drinking and having fun, on the evening of the attack. She told her friends she needed to use the bathroom, but her memories stopped there. When she regained consciousness, she found herself pinned to a mattress in an unfamiliar apartment, with a man she didn't know on top of her. He covered her mouth to prevent her from screaming, and she tried to resist. Surprisingly, the man eventually let her go. She was barefoot and disheveled, with her purse missing. She reported the incident to the police and described her attacker as a muscular African-American man, over 6 feet tall and 200 pounds. Although the police couldn't find the attacker at the time, they had his DNA, which they entered into the federal database, but the case remained unsolved for 2 years. It was later discovered that the same man had committed another attack, this time resulting in death. In the investigation of Mindy's case, the police collected multiple DNA samples and sent them to the lab for analysis. After conducting more in-depth analysis, the lab experts found a match. The DNA belonged to one of the individuals who had voluntarily provided a sample DNA. Surprisingly, the match was not Mindy's ex-boyfriend Kyle or his father Rodney, who had initially raised suspicion. Instead, the DNA from the skin found under Mindy's fingernails belonged to 34-year-old Moe Gibbs. He worked as a corrections officer at the Barnes County Jail. O had undergone a big transformation in his past, having moved from being a member of the Crips gang in Central California to serving in the U.S. Navy. He had been married with children but got divorced and later relocated to Valley City. Before becoming a corrections officer, Moe worked as a college guard. Moe had been working at the Barnes County Jail and was known to the investigators handling Mindy's case. As he appeared to be a decent individual, it came as a shock when his DNA was found under Mindy's fingernails. The investigators devised a plan to bring Gibbs in for questioning without arousing his suspicion. They contacted him, stating they needed to ask a few more questions, all while keeping him under discreet surveillance in case he attempted to flee. Moe arrived at the police station on time, unaware of the true purpose of the interrogation. Before revealing the DNA evidence, the police offered Moe the opportunity to take a polygraph test. He agreed and responded to all the questions, but there are some indications that he is lying. Despite this, Moe maintained his innocence in Mindy's death. When informed about the DNA match, Moe remained surprisingly calm, continuing to deny any involvement in Mindy's murder. However, when told that his DNA also linked him to a case in Fargo, his demeanor changed, and he smiled, but said nothing. The collected was enough to arrest Moe Gibbs. He was handcuffed and charged with the murder of Mindy Morgenstern, followed by charges related to the Fargo case. After his arrest became public, 5 female prisoners came forward, alleging that Moe had coerced them into sexual relations while he was on duty. As a result, Moe faced 6 additional charges. It may seem unusual that someone with a prison record was hired as a college guard and later as a corrections officer at Barnes County Jail. However, Moe Gibbs' employers were unaware of his true identity. He had changed his name from Glendale Morgan Jr. to Moe Gibbs before applying to these positions. When he was in the Navy, Moe was involved in a drive-by shooting and subsequently spent over 5 years in prison. During his trial, Moe's lawyers proposed a theory to explain how his DNA came to be under the victim's fingernails, Mindy. They suggested that she may have touched the same door handle as Moe, thus transferring the DNA. The defense further implied that Mindy's boyfriend, Jordan, could have been the one responsible for harming her. Moe pleaded guilty to charges, except those directly related to Mindy's death. Notably, neither his fingerprints nor DNA were found on the knife that caused Mindy's injuries. Prosecutors attributed this lack of evidence to the use of a cleaning agent, which they believed he had eradicated all traces. The prosecution's theory was that Moe had entered Mindy's apartment immediately after she, with the intention of coercing her into intimacy. When she resisted, he lost his temper, murdered her. In an attempt to eliminate any evidence, he then doused the area with a cleaning agent. Moe maintained that if he had been the one responsible for Mindy's death, he would not have willingly provided a DNA sample. On July 12, 2007, the jury was unable to reach a unanimous decision, resulting in the trial being postponed by 4 months. During the retrial, prosecutors were better prepared and showed DNA experts to counter-challenge the defense's argument. The defense claimed that Moe's DNA was found under Mindy's fingernails due to accidental contact with a door handle. However, the experts testified that the amount of DNA found could only have resulted from intense physical contact. Additionally, Moe's cellmate testified that he had confessed to the crime and had even expressed a desire to commit the same crime again if given the opportunity. After deliberating for 27 hours, the jury delivered a guilty verdict on November 20, 2007. When given the opportunity to speak before sentencing, Moe Gibbs, 35, maintained his innocence and expressed sympathy for Mindy's family. He sent his condolences, as well as prayers, to Mindy's family. He added that it was horrible and it should never have happened, and he was sorry that it had happened. The judge found the evidence against Gibbs to be overwhelming, showing that he had strangled and stabbed Mindy, then poured the detergent over her face and body. The judge also denied Moe's request for a new trial. Moe Gibbs received a life sentence in prison without the possibility of parole for the murder of Mindy Morgenstern. He was also given a 12-year sentence for assaulting a woman in Fargo and an additional 15 years for other charges. Moe Gibbs is currently serving his sentence at the North Dakota State Penitentiary in Bismarck. After the sentencing, Mindy's mother, Eunice, addressed Moe that she forgive his, but she won't forget what you did to Mindy. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Grace Holland. Grace Holland was born on September 23, 1984, in the small town of Creve Coeur, Missouri. She grew up in a close-knit family with her parents and 2 sisters, including her twin, Laura. Together, they explored the world, played, studied, and dreamed of the future. Grace's education at a Catholic school instilled in her a sense of discipline, and her degree in criminal justice further fueled her interest in law and order. From a young age, Grace was a purposeful and responsible individual. She was drawn to the idea of helping others and upholding the law. After graduating from university, Grace got married and had 4 children, who became the center of her life. She devoted herself to caring for them, teaching them new things, and sharing her love for the world. As a proud mother, Grace often shared photos of her children with those around her and cherished every moment spent with them. However, in 2015, Grace's life took a dramatic turn. She met Robert Deas, the head of the Maryland County Fire Department. His courageous profession and heroic image immediately caught her attention. Robert and Grace were swept up in a whirlwind of emotions. He was captivated by her beauty, intelligence, and kindness, while she admired his strength, determination, and passion for helping others. However, a dark secret lurked behind Robert's impeccable reputation. His brother, David, a former St. Louis police officer, had been charged with a serious crime in 1998. Nearly 2 decades later, David passed away, leaving behind unanswered questions and secrets. David's influence had a profound impact on Robert's life and career. As a respected police officer, David had opened doors for Robert in law enforcement, helping him advance in his career. Robert also served in a fire department and held the position of deputy president at the family company, Liberty Arts Works. The company specialized in creating memorials for fallen military personnel, firefighters, and police officers. Through his work and involvement with the Backstopper organization, which supported first responders, Robert forged strong connections in his professional network. Robert had a child from his first marriage, but the relationship ultimately ended in divorce. He then married Grace, a detective from the Maryland Police, in an effort to find happiness again. This union strengthened his ties to law enforcement, and he and Grace built a life together, buying a new home and starting fresh. However, their seemingly perfect relationship soon began to unravel, revealing underlying issues. Robert's past continued to haunt him. His brother had been accused of a crime, tarnishing Robert's reputation and casting doubt on his integrity. Furthermore, cracks began to appear in his relationship with Grace. Despite their outward success, their relationship was marked by turmoil, with periods of calm punctuated by intense arguments. According to Laura, Grace's twin sister, Robert exerted significant control over Grace's life, dictating her spending habits, social interactions, and even her relationships. Laura revealed that Grace's best friend ended their relationship after a dinner with Robert, but the reason for the breakup was unclear. This development only increased Grace's feelings of isolation from her loved ones. Grace claimed that Robert forced her to quit her job and join the family business, although there was no official record of her employment. The family alleged that Robert simply instructed the company to pay her without documenting it. During this challenging time, Grace discovered she was pregnant with Robert's child. However, instead of bringing them closer together, the pregnancy increased the tension in their relationship. Their text messages, presented at the trial, revealed their conflicting desires. Grace wanted to keep the child and repair their relationship, while Robert was ready to end things. Court documents provided by the Holland family were shocking. Robert offered to pay Grace $1,600 to have an abortion, wanting to get rid of the child. However, an unexpected event occurred in the summer of 2020 in Missouri, the tragic death of 35-year-old Grace Holland. The suspicious circumstances surrounding Grace's death have left her family and the people of St. Louis determined to investigate further. As the government remained silent, distrust of the official story grew. Grace's mother faces accusations, which only strengthens the family's resolve to uncover the truth. The investigation started slowly at first, but after a lawsuit was filed and evidence was found, the case gained momentum, crossing state lines and captivating the entire country. Public opinion demands a fair verdict. On October 29, 2021, Laura Holland, Grace's sister, posted a heartbreaking letter on the police department's Facebook page. In it, she revealed that Grace had been living in fear of her husband Robert's aggressive behavior and had sought help from the Maryland Fire Department on June 24, 2020. Grace had secretly recorded one of their arguments, which later became evidence of their abusive relationship. On the recording, Robert can be heard insulting Grace, saying he didn't want to be with her. Robert was furious with Grace, accusing her of being lazy while he worked hard. In an attempt to calm him down, Grace confessed her love for him, but this only made Robert angrier. He eventually left her, leaving Grace alone with feelings of bitter loneliness and deep emotional pain. However, the situation seemed to have taken a turn for the better by July 21. At around 10 p.m., Robert and Grace took a photo together, lying on their bed in their new home. Both of them were smiling, and it seemed like they were trying to put their argument behind them. But this moment of peace was short-lived. 2 days later, on July 23, 2020, at 11:53 p.m., Robert called the emergency services, sobbing uncontrollably as he reported that his fiancée had shot herself. Paramedics rushed into the house to find Grace lifeless on the floor. The cause of her death was determined to be a gunshot wound to the head, resulting in instant death. However, the results of the autopsy, released on September 17, 2020, revealed a surprising level of detail. According to the report, the bullet that killed Grace was fired from a gun she was holding in her right hand. The bullet pierced her left temple, deviated from the center line to the right, and lodged in the occipital lobe of her skull. The unusual trajectory of the bullet raised questions among experts about the official story. The Holland family stated that the detective spoke briefly with Robert at the crime scene. Robert reportedly told the police that Grace was struggling with depression following a recent miscarriage, their second. He claimed that he was in the living room when Grace emerged from the bedroom to hug him, but soon returned to the bedroom. He said he heard a shot and found Grace in the bedroom with a gun and blood under her head. The detective submitted a report to the medical examiner at 7:25 a.m. However, the Holland family disputed this, claiming that Robert visited the police station with his lawyer on the same day. Robert gave a written statement that contradicted the report. In his new version of events, Robert stated that he and Grace were in the bedroom together before she left for work. According to Robert, Grace returned to hug him, brought her face close to his, said goodbye, and then a shot occurred. A published press release on January 31, 2024, raised questions about a missing recording of an interview between Robert and a detective from the police department during the investigation. Jeffrey Hartman, the police chief, confirmed the existence of the video interview to a TV channel in 2021. Hartman reported that an error in the department's recording system led to the deletion of the record, leaving many questions unanswered. The police investigated Grace's death on August 4, 2020, and suggested she had been depressed, implying her death was expected. Analyzing Robert's phone data, detectives concluded it was a suicide based on forensic results. However, the Holland family doubted the police's findings and hired a private detective, believing Robert was responsible for her death. Laura, Grace's sister, shared her concerns about the investigation online, detailing the evidence and facts that suggested the police had gotten it wrong. The Holland family expressed their disappointment and frustration with the police, who had never considered Robert a suspect despite the numerous clues pointing to his involvement. The family also criticized the investigators for not conducting thorough tests, such as checking Robert's and Grace's hands for gunpowder residue and examining Robert's clothes for evidence. Furthermore, the police department had lost several crucial videos that could have shed light on Robert's role in the incident. The Holland family expressed concerns about potential police bias against Robert, citing his unusual behavior after Grace's death. Robert showed no concern for Grace's well-being. The family also pointed out that Robert knew some people involved in the investigation, which they believed may have influenced the case. The family claimed that obvious signs of domestic violence were ignored. After their requests for a more thorough investigation were met with no response, the Hollands took their case to court in 2023. They filed a lawsuit against Robert, accusing him of physical abuse and suggesting that he was either directly responsible for Grace's death. Robert's lawyer maintained his client's innocence, acknowledging some facts but denying any involvement in Grace's death. He suggested that the family's emotional distress may have led them to misinterpret events and wrongly accuse Robert. In December 2023, Hartman of the police department requested that the St. Louis County Police Department review the case of Grace. The county police department agreed to review the case and began examining the details in January 2024. During this time, police officers visited the home of Robert to provide medical assistance to his new girlfriend, Dr. Sarah Sweeney. The incident is being treated as a sudden death, but the exact cause is still under investigation. Detectives are waiting for the results of a toxicology report, which may take 4 to 6 weeks to complete. Dr. Sweeney had previously spoken about her struggles with serious illnesses, including bone disease and allergies, for which she was hospitalized in 2021. Her condition could have led to severe allergic reactions, including life-threatening anaphylactic shock, if left untreated. However, her family reported that she always carried an adrenaline shot to manage her allergies and kept her condition under control. They are choosing to wait for the official autopsy results before drawing any conclusions. Robert remains a suspect in the eyes of the law, despite not being charged in connection with the deaths of Holland and Sweeney. The outcome of the Sweeney autopsy may significantly impact the investigation into Grace Holland's death. Following a thorough re-examination, the St. Louis County Police have ruled out the possibility that Grace took her own life. The investigation's findings were submitted to the prosecutor's office in early December, and the case is currently being treated as a death by negligence. The case remains open, and the prosecutor's office may take further action once all the facts are known. Police Chief Jeffrey Hartman has reaffirmed the department's initial conclusion, despite growing doubts and public scrutiny. Meanwhile, the families of Holland and Sweeney continue to push for the release of autopsy and toxicology results, seeking clarity on whether Grace Holland's death was a tragic accident or if there are underlying circumstances that have yet to be uncovered. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore, the case of Tara Baker. Tara Baker was born on January 20, 1977, in East Point, Georgia. Her parents divorced when she was young, and her mother later remarried. She is the eldest of 4 siblings. From an early age, she showed a strong interest in the legal system, with the desire to pursue a career as a lawyer or judge. She would often engage in mock trials with her stuffed animals, create contracts with her relatives, and even write letters to politicians, including the President of the United States, to express her opinions. After high school, Tara attended Georgia College, where she earned 2 bachelor's degrees in just 3 years, graduating in 1999. She then enrolled at the University of Georgia, one of the top law schools in the country, located in Athens, a small town close to her parents' home. To avoid dorm life, Tara rented a house with 2 other university students, one of whom she knew from college. Tara worked at a prestigious law firm in downtown Athens, covering her expenses and gaining valuable experience in her future profession. In January 2001, Tara spent a lot of time studying at the university library. On the evening of January 18th, she went to the library to study with a friend. Her friend left the library around 7:30 p.m. Tara stayed behind, calling her friend at 9:46 p.m. to check if she had arrived home safely, mentioning that she would head home soon. The next day, around 6 p.m., Tara's mother, Virginia Baker, received a phone call from a woman who identified herself as a detective. The detective tells Virginia that they need her daughter Tara's fingerprints for their current investigation. Believing it was a prank, Virginia hung up, but her curiosity got the better of her. She decided to call the Athens police station to verify the call. Police said the caller was actually a forensic detective, and they further informed her that there had been a fire at Tara's home. The detective explained that they were trying to locate Tara, but so far, they had only found one of Tara's roommates, who had been out at the time of the fire. The other roommate was also missing, and investigators suspected that the unidentified body they found might be one of them. Virginia was desperate for information and asked the detective to describe the room where the body was found. The detective's response sent a chill down Tara's spine. The room was filled with Tara antique items, which she had spent years collecting. Virginia and her family immediately drove to Athens to see what was happening to their daughter, hoping that it was just a misunderstanding and that Tara was safe. Upon arriving at the police station, they were forced to wait for several hours without receiving any updates. Eventually, a detective emerged and delivered the devastating news. The body found in the house was indeed Tara's, and her death was a result of murder, not the fire. However, the detective was exhausted and declined to answer any questions. Before departing, he shared one crucial detail: Tara had inadvertently left behind a clue. Fragments of the perpetrator's skin were found under her fingernails, which could potentially aid in identifying the killer. Tara's family was shocked, confused, and hopeless by the news. Despite their requests for more information about Tara, the police remained silent, not providing any further details. The family of Tara Baker was left in the dark about her murder investigation. Despite their repeated attempts to get information from detectives, they were met with silence. The local police department never reached out to them, forcing the family to constantly call and visit the station to beg for updates. Through persistence, they were able to gather some details about the case. Firefighters were called to Tara's address on January 19 at approximately 11 a.m. in response to a fire. After extinguishing the flames, they found Tara's body inside. The medical examiner's report confirmed that she had been murdered, with signs of strangulation and stab wounds. It appeared that the killer had set the fire to destroy evidence after Tara's death. However, the police refused to share the medical examiner's report with Tara's parents, leaving them without crucial information about her murder. The family also discovered that some evidence may have been destroyed by the firefighters. Unfortunately, this is not uncommon in cases like this. Investigators may not have properly secured the crime scene, which could have resulted in the loss of evidence. As Tara's family sought answers about her death, they were met with a lack of transparency and disrespect from the police. They were not kept informed about the investigation, were often treated rudely and unprofessionally. In an attempt to hold the police accountable, they began to record their conversations and filed complaints, but these efforts yielded no results. The family sought the advice of a renowned criminologist. However, the local police department would only allow him to review the case materials under one condition: he was not to share any information or findings with Tara's relatives. This left Tara's family unable to find answers about her death. Tara's family waited 10 years to get her death certificate. After writing to the state governor, they finally received it, but it didn't give them the answers they were looking for. Instead of explaining what caused her death, the certificate simply stated that she died from multiple injuries, without providing any further details. Despite the police continued their investigation, but their actions raised several questions. When Tara's body was discovered, firefighters immediately called the police, recognizing that a murder had taken place. But the crime scene was seriously destroyed due to extensive damage from the fire and water used to extinguish it. Furthermore, the family later discovered that some surviving items at the crime scene were not examined for fingerprints. Tara's laptop was found missing from her room, but other valuables were intact. Since there was no evidence of forced entry, investigators suspected that Tara was familiar with her killer and had voluntarily allowed them into her room. Although the crime scene was heavily damaged due to the fire, investigators established that Tara's two roommates were away from town at the time, leaving Tara home alone. Because it was difficult to determine the exact time of death, medical experts narrowed the window down to a time frame of 10 p.m., when Tara left the library, to 11 a.m., when neighbors called the fire department. The likelihood of the crime occurring during the early morning hours, given the speed at which the fire spread. The police investigation uncovered two significant leads. One involved a witness who reported seeing a middle-aged white man running down the street on the morning of the murder, wearing only a t-shirt and jeans despite the winter weather. Additionally, the police discovered a suspicious phone call made to Tara's university a few days before her death. A heavily intoxicated man had called the university's student information line. The man managed to correctly provide Tara Baker's name and request her phone number. Although the phone call was highly suspicious, the police were unable to identify the caller. Meanwhile, Tara's boyfriend became an immediate person of interest in the investigation. He provided an alibi, which was verified by the police, but they continued to view him with suspicion. Police have repeatedly questioned him and asked him to provide additional biological samples, answer additional questions, or undergo a lie detector test. Tara's boyfriend was asked to identify her body after the fire. He had traveled from another city to Athens as soon as he heard the news. Although Tara's parents were already in town, the police requested that the boyfriend make the identification. However, he was not allowed to enter the house. Instead, a police officer took a photograph of the body and showed it to him on a camera screen. The boyfriend was shocked and unsure if the body was Tara's. To confirm, he asked to see a pair of earrings he had given her. The officer retrieved the earrings from the body Tara's and showed them to him. After seeing the earrings, the boyfriend confirmed that the body was indeed Tara's. The police then shifted their focus to a male student who had a reputation for being troublesome. Several female students reported that he had repeatedly asked them out on dates, despite being told no, and made them feel uncomfortable with his behavior. The student had also asked Tara out multiple times, despite knowing she had a boyfriend. Detectives investigated the student but found no evidence linking him to the crime. They even asked Tara's friends to monitor the boy's activities, but this did not bring any new progress. Detectives began to focus on another suspect, a guy who was Tara's co-worker. When they interviewed his co-workers, they discovered that his behavior in the days leading up to the murders was very strange. Specifically, he had stopped socializing with a group of close co-workers. Additionally, just days before the murders, he had told Tara that he would not be able to attend her birthday party, which was scheduled for the day after the murders. On the morning of January 19th, one of Tara's co-workers tried to convince him to attend birthday celebration, as Tara had been hurt by his initial refusal. When the colleague visited the attorney's office, however, he was nowhere to be found. This was unusual, as the attorney was typically present at the office in the mornings. A check of his work schedule revealed no meetings or appointments, adding to the mystery of his absence. His behavior raised suspicions after Tara's murder. He was absent on the day of the murder, but the next day, he visited a colleague's home and acted strangely. Many suspect that he regularly used illegal drugs, which may have contributed to his erratic behavior. The co-worker noticed several fresh scratches on his neck, which were notable because several pieces of skin were found under Tara's fingernails, suggesting that she may have scratched her attacker in self-defense. When questioned about the scratches, he claimed he got them from a cat and denied any involvement in Tara's murder. However, when asked about his suspicions regarding the killer, his response was unusual. He screams that Tara's father is the culprit, but he cannot produce any evidence to back up his accusation. Furthermore, he resigned from his position just a few months after the murder and left the state. It is unclear whether the police compared his DNA with the samples found under Tara's nails. But they have not shared any information about this aspect of the investigation, even with Tara's relatives. The police discovered that he was married, but still secretly dated 2 female colleagues. This revelation could explain his unusual behavior and unexplained absences from work. Both women also suspected that he was using illicit substances. However, police found no evidence to prove his involvement in the murder and eventually cleared him as a suspect. The detectives also investigated the maintenance company employees who had access to the house where Tara lived. They had a spare key, which might explain why there was no sign of forced entry. Unfortunately, this lead also yielded no results. Since then, the case has had no new clues. The police continue to search for new suspects and witnesses, but they are keeping many details about their investigation under wraps to avoid it being undermined. The investigation into Tara's murder continued over the years, with several new leads emerging, but it did not yield any results for the investigation. One witness reported seeing an African-American man near Tara's house on the day of the fire, while another claimed to have seen blood on a classmate's notebook shortly after the murder. Despite police efforts to pursue these leads, they ultimately led to dead ends. Tara's parents offered a $77,000 reward in hopes of generating new leads. The detective team working on the case changed several times, but they all encountered considerable difficulties due to lack of evidence. The fire in Tara's room burned most of the evidence, leaving the police with few clues to investigate. 19 years after Tara's murder, a podcast about her case was released, generating renewed interest and attention. The podcast gathered information from Tara's family and individuals connected to the case, re-examining the evidence and helped reinvestigate the case. The police department took notice of the podcast, leading to better cooperation between detectives and Tara's family. For several months, detectives reviewed all available information and evidence, using modern DNA analysis tools to re-examine the evidence. Their efforts paid off on May 13, 2024, when police announced that they had finally arrested the perpetrator, 23 years after the murder. The suspect, Edric Lamont Faust, 48, was arrested, but police did not reveal how they identified the suspect, citing the need to keep some information secret to protect ongoing legal proceedings. Investigators only mentioned that modern DNA analysis tools and other biological evidence played a crucial role in Edric's identification. Further details of the case were not disclosed at the press conference, and police chose to withhold evidence to avoid compromising Edric's trial. However, his arrest documents revealed that he was accused of assaulting Tara. Additionally, a piece of skin was found under Tara's fingernails, which was used to extract the killer's DNA using modern DNA analysis tools. The police had likely known about Edric for years due to his long history of crime, which included multiple arrests. At the time of Tara's murder, he was 25 and lived in the same city as she. Despite this, the police initially found no evidence suggesting that Edric knew Tara. It wasn't until recently, thanks to advanced DNA analysis, that Edric became a suspect in the case. Detectives only started investigating him a few days before his arrest. Edric is currently in jail awaiting trial. The police are confident that they have found the right person, as they obtained irrefutable DNA evidence. As a result, Edric was denied bail, and Tara's case is now considered closed. Tara's family finally finds out the truth after 23 years. Thanks to a new team of detectives who reopen the case and solve it. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Kathy Martin. Kathy Martin was born on October 25, 1959, in Houston, Texas. Kathy grew up in a peaceful and happy family. During her childhood, she was very close to her older sister. When she was a teenager, Kathy met Mike Odom, whom she would later marry and start a family. After the wedding, the two settled in a quiet suburb outside of Houston, and soon after, they had a daughter and a son. After the birth of their second child, Kathy stayed home and took care of the children. Meanwhile, Mike worked at her father's small sign factory. Thanks to the financial support of Kathy's parents, the family was able to provide for their children. Therefore, Kathy was able to take care of the children without having to worry about working extra. On March 3, 1987, Kathy stayed home to take care of the children as usual. Mike went to work and then met up with friends at a bar after work. He called Kathy from a pay phone, but she didn't answer. This worried Mike because Kathy rarely left the house. He called several times but got no response. Worried about his wife, Mike called their neighbor, Tim Robinson, and asked him to check on her. Tim went to the house and knocked on the door, but no one answered. He looked through the living room window and saw that the television was still on. So he knocked again but got no response. At this point, he began to worry that something serious might have happened to Kathy. Instead of going home to call Mike or the police, he decided to drive around town looking for police patrols. After a few minutes of searching, he spotted a police car and explained the situation. He asked them to check on Kathy to see if she was okay. When the police arrived at the house, they also got no response to their knocking. They decided to try the door and found it unlocked. Once inside, the police found Kathy's older daughter lying unconscious on the sofa, clearly traumatized but still alive. The police quickly called an ambulance and continued to check other rooms in the house. In the bedroom, they found the younger child lying in her crib, safe and sound. But when they entered another room, they discovered a horrific scene. Kathy was lying on the floor, covered in blood and naked. The police immediately determined that she was dead. Her arms were also tied with a light cord. Paramedics took Kathy's daughter to the hospital and began investigating the crime scene. Kathy's father arrived at the house, but the police did not reveal any specific details. Instead, they asked him to go to the hospital to care for his granddaughter when she woke up. While waiting at the hospital, he learned of his daughter's death from a news report on TV. When Mike arrived at the house, the police quickly discovered something strange. He arrived late and had blood-like stains on his shirt. The police asked him to hand over his clothes and answer questions. During this time, the police discovered some interesting signs. They found several blood stains in the bathroom, indicating that the attacker had tried to hide the evidence after the crime. This suggested that the attacker had been in the house for some time to clean up. Forensic experts also discovered some important clues. There were no signs of forced entry, and all the windows and doors except the front door were locked. This suggested that Kathy had invited the attacker into the house or that the attacker had a key. Police speculated that the attacker may have threatened to harm Kathy's children if she screamed or resisted. Therefore, Kathy may have complied with the attacker's demands, hoping to be spared, but was ultimately murdered. As doctors worked to save Kathy's daughter, they discovered that she had been brutally beaten, most likely with her bare hands. She spent several hours in critical condition at the hospital, and her chances of survival were still very low. After examining Kathy's body, medical experts determined that she had suffered severe injuries with 16 stab wounds, most of which were concentrated in the abdomen. They also discovered that she had been sexually assaulted and collected biological samples of the offender from the scene. However, at that time, DNA analysis methods were not widely used in forensic science. Therefore, experts were unable to extract DNA profiles from biological samples. They were only able to determine the killer's blood type, so the sample was sent to the lab for further analysis. The police had noticed suspicious stains on his shirt early in the investigation and had kept the clothes for examination. His behavior that evening was very suspicious. He had gone out with friends after work, but instead of going home when he couldn't reach his wife, he asked a neighbor to check on him. The police had seen similar cases before, where a husband killed his wife and created an alibi by going out with friends. He would then ask someone else to check on his wife to avoid being the first to discover the body and throwing the police off the trail. The police expanded their investigation to see if Mike might have planned the murder before meeting his friends. They also discovered that Mike had a criminal record. After graduating from high school, he was arrested for selling drugs to an undercover police officer. Mike was sentenced to 6 years in prison but only served 2 years before being paroled. He later married Kathy. Although Mike had a criminal record, the police needed more evidence to charge him. The police also began investigating Mike's neighbor, Tim, because of signs of suspicion. Tim drove around town looking for patrol officers instead of calling the police. The police checked Tim's car and found suspicious blood-like stains on the carpet. They sent these samples to the lab for analysis. Now investigators wondered if Mike and Tim might have worked together to commit the crime. After completing the report, the medical examiner came to an important conclusion. Kathy's time of death was around 1 p.m. before she was discovered around 6 p.m. The police expanded their investigation to determine the suspects' whereabouts around that time and to find out what they did after the murder. Mike and Tim both claimed to be at work at the time. So the police set out to see if their statements were accurate. 2 days after the murder, they received a call from the hospital saying Kathy's daughter had woken up. The police went to see her in the hope that she would provide important information about what had happened. However, they encountered a major obstacle. The 4-year-old girl's memory was almost completely erased. She only remembered a light-haired man entering the house, while Mike and Tim had dark hair. But the police did not rule them out as suspects. They believed that the severe trauma could have made her memory inaccurate. The police received a call from the lab with surprising information. Experts examined the evidence and found that the stain on Tim's car carpet was motor oil, and the stain on Mike's shirt was just paint, not evidence of a crime. In addition, many of Mike and Tim's co-workers also confirmed that they had been at work all day and did not leave until the evening. Thus, they had no opportunity to go to Kathy's house and commit the crime. The police requested a lie detector test and the results showed that neither of them were lying. There was no conclusive evidence. The police had to review the entire case and investigate other suspects who might be familiar to Kathy's family. Because the attacker could have easily entered Kathy's house. During the investigation, they had conversations with Kathy's relatives and friends to find out who they thought might have committed the crime. Many of them immediately named the same person, Greg. Greg was Kathy's brother-in-law, and her loved ones revealed that she often complained about his behavior. Specifically, according to Kathy, Greg openly flirted with her and repeatedly tried to convince her to have sex with him. Kathy also said that Greg often made inappropriate comments about her appearance, especially about her abdomen. And according to the evidence collected, we know that most of the injuries were on Kathy's abdomen. The police also knew that Greg had a history of illegal drug use and a criminal record. Therefore, the police began to suspect him and soon found some important clues. They found Greg's fingerprints matched one in Kathy's house, as well as a hair that matched his. However, it should be noted that Greg often visited Kathy's family, so it is possible that the fingerprints and hair were in the house before the murder occurred. Kathy's parents also believed that he was the one who killed their daughter. Kathy's mother specifically remembered one time when Greg visited Kathy's daughter at the hospital. When she saw Greg, she had a clear look of fear on her face. These observations suggested that she was afraid of him. However, when asked, she could not remember what happened on the day of the murder. After hearing all this information, the police summoned Greg for questioning. However, he denied any involvement in the murder and said that he was with a friend at the time. During the questioning, Greg asked to go to the parking lot because he was afraid of being fined for expired parking. However, he did not return to the police station. Greg's wife, Kathy's sister, said that on the day of the murder, Greg dropped her off at around 10:30 a.m. and picked her up at 2:30 p.m. This meant that Greg had a 4-hour window around the time of the murder, enough time for him to commit the crime. However, the police still did not find enough evidence to prove Greg's involvement in the murder. In a last-ditch effort to find more clues, the police decided to analyze a semen sample taken from Kathy's body. However, at that time, the technology only allowed for the blood type of the owner of the semen sample to be determined. In addition, the analysis of the samples collected from the case was too small to be tested. However, the police still decided to perform the test. The results showed that the blood type of the owner of the semen sample matched Greg's blood type, but this was not enough to conclude that he was guilty. As a result, the police were unable to arrest him. They continued to search for more evidence, but were unable to prove that Greg was involved in the case. Kathy's family believed that Greg was the killer. Kathy's sister Shelley still did not believe that her husband was involved in the case and continued to live with him. In the years that followed, the police continued to revisit the case, hoping to find any new clues. In 1998, 11 years after Kathy was murdered, they requested a DNA analysis on the remaining semen sample. However, experts were only able to extract a partial DNA profile, which, when compared to Greg's DNA, showed that Greg was among the 2% of the population who could match the profile. He could not be arrested based on this result. The police again called Greg in for questioning, telling him that the semen from Kathy's body matched his DNA. Greg then changed his original statement, saying that Kathy had been romantically involved with him and that he had actually visited her on the day of the murder, but Greg insisted that she was still alive when he left. The police were suspicious of Greg's sudden change in story because suspects often change their stories when they hear about DNA evidence. In addition, Kathy had complained about Greg's flirtations, feeling uncomfortable around him. So it was unlikely that she would have had a secret relationship with him. But the police knew that they could not convict without a perfect DNA match. The local police reviewed the case and confirmed that a guilty verdict was almost impossible, and the case was put on hold again for many years. In 2002, the police reopened the case and asked for help from forensic scientist Catherine Long. At the time, Catherine was doing groundbreaking DNA research. She and her colleagues wanted to know if the offender's DNA might still be on Kathy's body after the strangulation, and if they could extract that DNA for analysis. To test this, Catherine and her team conducted a simulation experiment. They followed the steps the perpetrators took by briefly strangling each other, then taking samples from their hands and necks for analysis. The results showed that even in such a short interaction, there were still enough skin cells to extract and analyze DNA. The police began to focus on the available evidence when they were unable to re-examine her body. They decided to thoroughly examine all the items related to the case to see if the perpetrator had come into contact with them. They quickly noticed the string of lights that the killer had used to tie Kathy's hands, which the police gave to Catherine and her colleagues to examine. As they began their work, they noticed that the string had been stored in a paper bag. This was important because the paper bag allowed air to circulate, preventing moisture buildup and protecting the biological samples. Experts used cotton swabs to collect biological samples from the entire length of the rope. They paid special attention to areas on the rope that still had traces of Kathy's blood. After analysis, they discovered 2 DNA profiles. The first profile, belonging to the victim Kathy, the second profile completely matched Greg's DNA sample. The police finally had evidence that Greg was the one who tied Kathy's hands. and that he was the killer. 15 years after Kathy's death, the perpetrator was finally arrested. During questioning, Greg did not confess, insisting that he had a romantic relationship with Kathy. The police did not believe him. While awaiting trial, Greg was detained. A cellmate of Greg's contacted the police and said that Greg had confessed to him. According to the friend, Greg told them the details of the attack and murder. Greg said that one day, he had been using illegal drugs and went to Kathy's house. Once inside, Greg tried to force Kathy to have sex, but she refused and asked him to leave. However, Greg became aggressive and attacked Kathy's daughter, causing many serious injuries. Greg assured Kathy that if she did not comply with his wishes, he would kill her. Kathy had no choice but to agree to protect her children. Greg then tied her up, attacked her, and killed her with many injuries. To cover up the crime, Greg washed the blood off himself in the bathroom and changed into Kathy's husband's clothes before leaving the school. The police forced Greg to face the truth. This time, Greg confessed to killing Kathy. In 2004, he pleaded guilty in court and was sentenced to 45 years in prison. However, he only served 4 years before dying at the age of 56 of liver cancer. Kathy's husband, Mike, died at the age of 45. For 15 years, Kathy's family, including her parents and children, waited patiently, trusting that the police would find the killer. Although they believed Greg was the killer, they saw him continue to live with their second daughter, but there was nothing they could do. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Heidi Firkus. Heidi Marie Eriksson was born on December 14, 1984, to John and Elinda Eriksson, and was the youngest of their 3 children and their only daughter. She was known for her playful and artistic nature, and lived her life to the fullest. After graduating from high school in 2003, she continued her education at the University of Northwestern in Roseville. During this time, she was a regular attendee at Calvary Church in the city, where she had been involved since her early years. It was at Calvary Church that she met Nick Firkus, with whom she shared the role of youth group leaders, serving their community with dedication and passion. Nicholas Firkus was born on February 25, 1983, to Julie and Steve Firkus. He was a driven and ambitious young man who dedicated himself to his work as the director of operations at a reputable carpet cleaning company. Known for his well-rounded personality and strong work ethic, he had found his true match in Heidi, whom he met at their shared place of worship, Calvary Church, in 2005. At the ages of 22 and 20, respectively, Nick and Heidi made the joyful decision to take their relationship to the next level. Surrounded by their loved ones and the familiar walls of the church that had witnessed the blossoming of their love, they exchanged vows, sealing their commitment to each other. To their friends and community, Nick and Heidi's marriage appeared perfect. They shared a love for travel, biking, and their church. They often hosted dinner parties for their loved ones. Heidi had recently started working at a financial firm where her father was employed. Their bond seemed to be growing stronger with time. However, behind closed doors, a different story was unfolding. On the morning of April 25, 2010, Heidi called 911 from her home in St. Paul, Minnesota, reporting a break-in. Only 38 seconds into the call, Heidi yelled no, and a gunshot was heard. 65 seconds later, Nick used Heidi's phone to contact the dispatcher, saying, "Please, someone just broke into my house and shot me and my wife." Nick was overcome with grief, repeatedly crying and begging for help, saying, "Oh my Heidi, my wife is dead, please get here." He also shouted no in despair. When the police arrived, they found Heidi unresponsive on the kitchen floor with a gunshot wound to her back. Nick was beside her, still on the phone with the 911 dispatcher, despite having been shot in the upper left leg. He was extremely upset and told the police that 1 or 2 intruders had broken into their home. According to Nick, he had grabbed his shotgun and tried to escape with Heidi through the back door, heading towards their detached garage. However, the intruder managed to take the shotgun from him and shot both Nick and Heidi. Sadly, Heidi was pronounced dead at the scene, her life cut short by the tragic events. Nick, meanwhile, was rushed to the hospital for treatment and was later questioned by the police while still in the hospital. Police asked Nick why he and Heidi left the safety of their bedroom to face the potential danger. Nick explained that they were trying to escape through the back door. After receiving medical treatment for his wounds at the hospital, Nick was released just 3 hours later and was interviewed again at the police station about the incident. At the police station, Nick provided a detailed account of what happened. He recalled watching a movie with Heidi and having a glass of wine before going to bed around midnight. Nick said he woke up around 6:10 to 6:15 a.m. when he heard the screen door open and someone fiddling with the doorknob. The investigators questioned Nick about locking the deadbolt, and he admitted that he and Heidi usually made sure to lock it, but he believed he had forgotten to do so that particular night. After hearing the noises, Nick retrieved his shotgun from the upstairs closet, which he had brought up from the basement a month ago because he noticed it was starting to rust. Although the shotgun was initially empty, Nick loaded it when he heard the noises. He then woke up Heidi, instructed her to call 911, and told her to leave the house and go to the garage where their cars were parked. Nick also shared that he and Heidi had a safety plan in place in case of trouble, which was to go to the garage where their cars were parked. Nick, who is right-handed, was holding a pair of jeans in his right hand and a shotgun in his left hand as he walked behind Heidi toward the garage. They stopped at the front door, where Heidi retrieved her wallet from a table. Suddenly, the door burst open and a tall, dark-skinned man rushed in. The intruder wore a dark hooded sweatshirt with the hood pulled tightly around his face. Nick dropped the jeans, and the intruder grabbed the shotgun barrel. The two men then engaged in a physical struggle. During the altercation, the gun fired, and Nick said his finger accidentally slipped onto the trigger. He believed he hit Heidi in the back, causing her to collapse immediately. They continued fighting over the shotgun, which fired again, hitting Nick in the upper thigh and causing him to fall to the ground. The intruder then fled out the front door. Nick told investigators that Heidi was unresponsive, and he eventually lost consciousness. Nick told the police that his house was supposed to be foreclosed the next day, and he and his partner Heidi had planned to inform their parents and friends about their situation on the same day. According to Nick, they had fallen behind on their bills, and their house had been foreclosed on and sold to someone else. As a result, they were required to vacate the premises, but they hadn't shared this information with anyone. Their plan was to pack up their belongings on Sunday and Monday morning, leaving some items in the garage to collect later, and then find someone to stay with temporarily. However, their plans were disrupted, and their peaceful home was left with an air of tragedy. The lives of Nick and Heidi were forever changed by the devastating events of that morning. The investigation continued, with law enforcement securing the area and interviewing residents. None of the neighbors reported seeing anyone leaving the Furcus residence. However, one neighbor, Brendan O'Connell, who was looking after kittens in a nearby house, told the authorities that he heard an argument followed by gunfire. Nick begged for mercy, claiming a shooter had attacked him and a woman. After talking to police, Nick's lawyer hired an artist to update the sketch, details emerging: an African-American male, 40 to 60 years old. The police initially searched for an unknown African-American male intruder based on Nick's description, but found no evidence or witnesses to support his story. Despite a thorough investigation, no one was arrested or charged in connection with Heidi's death, leaving the case unsolved for many years. Years later, a surprising revelation came to light. Over 10 years had passed since Heidi's murder, and Nick had seemingly moved on with his life. marrying Rachel and starting a family. However, when financial troubles resurfaced, Rachel began to suspect that Nick was hiding something. Rachel's concerns about their financial situation and Nick's evasiveness sparked her curiosity, prompting her to investigate Nick's past. As she dug deeper, she uncovered secrets and inconsistencies that made her question everything she thought she knew about her husband and his possible involvement in Heidi's death. Rachel was unaware of the financial troubles her husband Nick was hiding, similar to those he had faced with his previous wife Heidi years earlier. Her concerns prompted her to contact the authorities, which renewed interest in Heidi's murder case. Investigators began looking into Nick's second marriage to Rachel, whom he married in 2012. However, by the time Rachel spoke with the authorities, she had already divorced Nick due to his growing financial problems. Before their 2019 divorce, Rachel had recorded a conversation where she confronted Nick about his deception. She told investigators that Nick was repeating the same patterns he had with Heidi, including failing to pay property taxes. In fact, she had seen a letter warning that they would be evicted by 2020 if the taxes weren't paid. Rachel's decision to contact the police with her suspicions set off a chain of events that would once again bring the Heidi Fergus murder case into the spotlight. Sergeant Nicole Sipes, assigned to the case, listened carefully to Rachel's concerns and began re-examining the evidence. Sergeant Nicole Sykes of the St. Paul Police Department was determined to solve Heidi's murder. To uncover the truth, she made a bold decision to ask the FBI to analyze the 911 call audio recordings. She hoped to find crucial clues that could explain what happened on the night of the murder. The FBI's analysis yielded a surprising result. It found no evidence of a third person being present during the incident. This discovery contradicted the husband's earlier statement to the police, leaving Sergeant Sipes and her team puzzled. If only Heidi and her husband were in the house, what led to her death? The absence of a third person increased suspicion around the husband's possible involvement in the crime. Sergeant Sipes was more determined than ever to uncover the truth and bring justice to Heidi and her grieving family. The FBI's findings opened up a new avenue of investigation, which Sergeant Sipes was committed to pursuing with increased intensity. The investigators obtained financial documents that disputed Nicholas Fergus's earlier statements, further implicating him in Heidi's murder. Fergus's account of the events surrounding Heidi's death kept changing. Initially, he claimed that an intruder took his gun and shot both him and Heidi. Later, he said that the intruder didn't take the gun, but his own finger accidentally pulled the trigger, hitting Heidi in the back. The crime scene investigation yielded no signs of a struggle, such as overturned furniture or marks on the walls, contradicting Fergus's account. Forensic analysis of the scene also disputed Fergus's version of the shooting, particularly the trajectory of the bullet that struck Heidi. Furthermore, Heidi's 911 call made no mention of an intruder, and there was no evidence of a break-in or intruder at the crime scene. This lack of evidence led investigators to suspect that Fergus had planned to cover up his involvement in Heidi's death. As a result, an arrest warrant was issued for Nick Fergus on May 19, 2021, over a decade after Heidi's death. A SWAT team arrested Fergus at his home in Mounds View. The surprise arrest of Nick stemmed from Rachel's suspicions and the tireless efforts of Police Sergeant Nicole Sipes. This sudden development astonished many who thought the case had stalled and would never reach a resolution. As the legal proceedings progressed, the case details would be re-examined, and the truth about that fateful night would gradually emerge. At the trial, Nick Fergus maintained that he was innocent and pleaded not guilty. Many of his family members, including his father, claimed to believe in his innocence, stating that Nick's love for Heidi would have prevented him from committing such a violent act. However, the jury disagreed with their assessment. On February 10, 2023, the jury delivered a shocking verdict after deliberating for 10 hours. They found Nick, the person Heidi trusted most, guilty of her brutal murder. This outcome left everyone who knew Heidi in a state of shock and disbelief. The prosecution built a strong case against Nick by showing that he was facing severe financial difficulties, which they argued led him to kill Heidi to avoid shame and conflict. They questioned the truth of Nick's claim that a home invader was responsible, suggesting that he fabricated the story to divert attention from himself. The prosecution presented convincing evidence, including the lack of signs of forced entry and inconsistencies in Nick's account. Notably, there was no DNA or physical evidence to support the presence of an intruder, which raised serious doubts about Nick's story. Prosecutor Rachel Craker argued that Nick's inability to accept the truth of his financial deception led him to commit a shocking crime, sacrificing Heidi's life to preserve his reputation. In contrast, Nick's defense attorney, Robert Richmond, countered that it didn't make sense for Nick's financial problems to suddenly drive him to murder. Nick claimed that killing his wife would somehow boost his reputation, but this statement is illogical. After intense debates during the trial, the jury finally reached a verdict that would determine whether Nick would be held accountable for Heidi's death. The jury carefully considered the evidence, emotional testimonies, and legal arguments before delivering a unanimous verdict. Nick Fergus was guilty of first-degree murder. On April 13, 2023, the judge handed down the most severe sentence possible: life in prison without parole. Although found guilty, Nick still insists he had nothing to do with Heidi's death. He maintains his innocence even after being sentenced. When he was sentenced, Nick said, "I understand the pain and loss felt by everyone here today. Justice has been served, but it came at a great cost. A broken family, a betrayed community, and a life cut short." The verdict brought a sense of closure to Heidi's family and friends, but it also left them with the painful realization that the man they thought they knew was capable of such a heinous act. So, you must be thinking, where is Nick now? Nick is currently serving his life sentence at the Minnesota Correctional Facility located in St. Cloud, Minnesota. Here's what drove Nick to commit the tragic act. The motive behind the killing remains unclear, but there are clues. In June 2009, Nick received foreclosure papers on their house, which was then sold at a sheriff's auction the same month. 10 months before Heidi's death, eviction proceedings began in February 2010, with a hearing scheduled for March 8, 2010. Nick attended the hearing alone. Initially, the lockout was set for April 9, 2010, but Nick called the attorneys, claiming his grandmother was in the hospital and about to die. He requested the lockout be rescheduled for April 26, 2010. However, investigators found no evidence to support this claim. When questioned, Nick said Heidi was aware of their financial troubles and that they had made plans together to move out of their foreclosed home and start fresh elsewhere. The truth behind a tragic event was finally revealed by prosecutors. A husband, Nick, had been hiding their severe financial struggles from his wife, Heidi. Tragically, before she could discover the truth, he took her life. Instead of being honest with his wife and working together to find a solution, Nick chose a devastating path. According to prosecutors, Nick's motive for killing his wife was his shame and fear of revealing their financial problems, which included $118,000 in credit card debt and 22 months of late mortgage payments. By killing Heidi, Nick avoided confronting the consequences of his own deception. In the end, justice was served, but Heidi's loved ones still suffered immense pain and loss. Unfortunately, no legal punishment could undo the harm or bring back the vibrant life that was cruelly taken. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Ekaterina Ashley Edlund Smith. Ekaterina Ashley Edlund was born on July 16, 1982, to her mother Vicky. She had two siblings, an older brother named Chad and a younger sister named Miranda, who looked up to Ekaterina as a role model. As children, Miranda would often try on Ekaterina's clothes and use her makeup, admiring her older sister and wanting to be just like her. As the years passed, Ekaterina and Miranda formed a strong bond, becoming more like best friends than sisters. Ekaterina grew up in Musney Park, Illinois, a suburban community outside the city, after her parents separated, and she lived with her mother. Those who knew Ekaterina described her as a kind, fun-loving person who cherished the holiday season and enjoyed giving humorous gifts to her friends and family. She was deeply involved in her church and had a strong desire to help others, always willing to lend a hand to those in need. Despite her happiness, Ekaterina longed to find love and thought she had found it when she met Todd Smith at a bar when she was 20 years old. Todd, a self-employed financial planner, had 3 daughters and worked from home. He met Ekaterina, and despite their differences, they clicked. Todd's flexible schedule allowed them to travel frequently. After 3 years together, Todd proposed to Ekaterina, and she happily accepted. They planned a small wedding in a local park, and Ekaterina was thrilled about their future. She loved Todd's daughters and was eager to build a life with him. Ekaterina's family, including her mother Vicky and siblings Chad and Miranda, adored Todd and thought he was an excellent match for Ekaterina. They trusted him to take care of her and believed the couple was meant to be. After marrying, Ekaterina and Todd settled in Musney Park and started their new life together. On October 20th, 2012, Ekaterina, 30, called her mother and said she was house-sitting for a friend. During their conversation, she mentioned she would visit for dinner on October 24th and had news to share. Vicky suspected that something was amiss, but she couldn't quite put her finger on what it was. Before ending their phone call, Vicky promised Ekaterina that she would cook her favorite meal, chicken and dumplings. Tragically, Vicky would never get the chance to keep that promise. Days later, Ekaterina vanished, and Vicky would never lay eyes on her again. On October 23rd, at 5 p.m., Todd, Ekaterina's husband, called 911 to report her disappearance. He told the dispatcher that Ekaterina was house-sitting for a friend and that he had been trying to reach her for hours without success. When he drove to the house, he found it empty. Ekaterina's siblings, Miranda and Chad, were alarmed when they heard the news. Chad, who was undergoing military training in Oklahoma, immediately flew to Illinois to help search for his sister. On the evening of the 23rd, a concerned citizen notified the police about an abandoned vehicle near Rock River. The caller reported that the car was not parked on the road, but rather in an easement, suggesting it had been hastily abandoned. When authorities arrived to investigate, they ran the license plate and identified it as belonging to Ekaterina Smith. Upon inspecting the vehicle, the officer found no signs of a struggle or any trace of Ekaterina herself. Ekaterina's mother, Vicky, was adamant that her daughter's disappearance was a clear indication of foul play when she learned that Ekaterina's car had been abandoned in an unfamiliar area. It was the only logical explanation to Vicky. If Ekaterina's car was found in that location, someone must have taken her and left the car there. Following the discovery of her car, Ekaterina's case was officially categorized as a missing person, and the search efforts intensified significantly. On October 12th, at 11 p.m., the police took Todd Smith in for a formal interview at the Winnebago County Sheriff's Department. During the interview, Todd told the detective that he last saw his wife Ekaterina on October 10th, not October 22nd. He stated that Ekaterina had come home briefly to do laundry in preparation for a big job interview the following day. According to Todd, while the laundry was in progress, Ekaterina left to go to the mall to make a purchase and returned home at 8:30 p.m. Todd reported that Ekaterina briefly returned home before leaving again to make one last stop. She had told him she needed to complete an errand before returning to the house she was watching for a friend. The next day, after Ekaterina was declared missing, Todd made an emotional appeal to the media, pleading for her safe return. Overcome with emotion, he broke down in tears as he begged for anyone with information about her whereabouts to come forward. As the search for Ekaterina continued, Search teams composed of officers and volunteers worked tirelessly to find her. They focused their efforts on a nearby park, where Ekaterina's car had been abandoned, hoping to find evidence or clues about her disappearance. When Ekaterina's brother Chad arrived in Illinois from his army training in Oklahoma, he joined the search for his missing sister at the park. With his military background, Chad took charge of the search party. He created a map, divided the volunteers into teams, and coordinated their efforts to ensure a thorough search. As the search continued, the officers employed a methodical approach, using dogs and walking in straight lines to cover as much ground as possible and detect any potential evidence, no matter how small. Meanwhile, Ekaterina's mother Vicky focused on spreading awareness about her daughter's disappearance. She posted missing person flyers at gas stations, convenience stores, and lampposts throughout the town, hoping to reach as many people as possible. Despite her overwhelming grief and fear of finding her daughter's body, Vicky was determined to keep searching for Ekaterina, even if she couldn't participate in the physical search herself. Todd, Ekaterina's husband, was overcome with emotion during this difficult time. Chad, trying to be supportive, urged Todd to stay strong and focused on finding Ekaterina. He stood by Todd's side, sympathetic to his brother-in-law's grief. Meanwhile, the police investigation turned up some disturbing clues. An officer found Ekaterina's purse near her abandoned car, and as he searched further down the road, he discovered more of her belongings, including her cell phone and bloody towels. It was clear that someone had deliberately discarded Ekaterina's possessions as they drove away from her car. Unfortunately, the police still had no idea where Ekaterina was, but they feared the worst. The recovered items were sent to the crime lab for analysis, and the police awaited the results with bated breath. As the police searched for clues, they explored every aspect of Ekaterina's personal life to understand what might have led to her disappearance. They wanted to know if she had any relationships outside her marriage, was involved in gambling or drugs, and what her daily routines were like. To gather this information, they interviewed her friends and family. Everyone they spoke to described Ekaterina as a kind, responsible person who always put her duties first and avoided anything risky. Her loved ones said she was dedicated to her job and had a strong work ethic. They also reported that she never showed any signs of addiction or irresponsible behavior. The people who knew Ekaterina described her as a loyal partner and a hard worker who always did the right thing. During the investigation into her disappearance, a woman came forward with an interesting clue. She claimed to have seen a blue car, similar to Ekaterina's, parked on a bridge over Rock River on the night she vanished. The trunk was open, and someone was kneeling behind it. Although the witness couldn't describe the person's gender or race, her tip led the police to suspect that Ekaterina might have been a victim of foul play and ended up in the river. However, they still needed concrete evidence to support this theory. The police continued to investigate Ekaterina's disappearance, looking into potential motives and suspects. Despite seeming to have a happy marriage, her husband Todd was still a person of interest. As the authorities knew that hidden conflicts or secrets can exist in any relationship, their inquiry led them to a teenager in town who had previously shown an unhealthy obsession with Ekaterina. Earlier in the year, Ekaterina had confided in friends about the boy's behavior, including allegations of voyeurism, such as spying on her through her bedroom window. This had made Ekaterina increasingly anxious at the time. Although the boy's activities had stopped when he left for college, the police wondered if he might have returned and resumed stalking Ekaterina. They devoted significant resources to finding him. 3 days into the search, crucial clues were discovered on Ekaterina's cell phone, which was being examined at the crime lab. The phone proved to be a crucial source of evidence for the investigators. By examining Ekaterina's cell phone records, they uncovered a wealth of information, including her text messages, call logs, pictures, videos, and GPS location data. This information enabled the police to reconstruct a more accurate timeline of Ekaterina's activities. The investigation revealed that Ekaterina was having an affair with a co-worker, Guy Gabriel. Initially, they had met after work and developed a connection that eventually turned romantic. However, a background check on Guy Gabriel exposed a troubling history of domestic violence. Additionally, the detectives found text messages in which Guy Gabriel demanded that Ekaterina leave her husband Todd for him. Given Guy Gabriel's violent past and his messages to Ekaterina, he became the top suspect in her disappearance. The police suspected that Guy Gabriel might have reacted violently towards Ekaterina because she refused to leave her husband for him. When Ekaterina's family discovered her affair with Guy, they were shocked and disbelieving. The seemingly perfect couple, Ekaterina and Todd, had hidden a dark secret. The news of Ekaterina's infidelity devastated Todd, who was unaware of the affair until the police investigation. Guy Gabriel was questioned by the police at the station, and although he appeared nervous, he admitted to the affair, but denied any involvement in Ekaterina's disappearance. He claimed to have been at work on the night she went missing. During the investigation, the police uncovered an incident that had occurred 2 weeks before Ekaterina's disappearance. Witnesses reported that a black Volkswagen Jetta had sped through the parking lot of the auto shop where Ekaterina and Guy worked, causing a scene during lunchtime. A mysterious driver in a VW Jetta threw a stack of flyers out of the car's sunroof, scattering them among the employees gathered outside. The flyers contained a derogatory remark about Ekaterina and Guy Gabriel's relationship, but the identity of the driver remained unknown. Meanwhile, the police questioned Ekaterina's hairstylist, who shared that Ekaterina had confided in her about feeling unsafe and threatened. Ekaterina had even considered buying a gun for protection and had become paranoid about being followed. She had gone so far as to take her phone to a store to check for a tracking device, suspecting that someone was monitoring her movements. At the police garage, crime scene investigators searched Ekaterina's car for clues and used a special chemical called luminol to detect blood. They found a large amount of blood in the trunk. Meanwhile, a firefighter pulled a mysterious object from the water, which turned out to be a severely decomposed female body. The body was difficult to identify due to its condition. At the medical examiner's office, dental experts compared the body's teeth to Ekaterina Smith's dental records and confirmed that the body belonged to her. The autopsy revealed that Ekaterina's cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. Ekaterina's family was devastated by the news, and her mother, Vicky, was in disbelief. The police cleared the teenage boy who had been allegedly stalking Ekaterina as a suspect after verifying his alibi. The police then turned their attention to Guy Gabriel, Ekaterina's boyfriend outside of her marriage. Guy provided an alibi, claiming he was at work during the time of Ekaterina's disappearance and murder. His managers and co-workers corroborated his alibi, and the police cleared him as a suspect. Although Guy was no longer a suspect, the police asked for his perspective on who may have hurt Ekaterina. Guy revealed that Ekaterina's husband, Todd, exhibited controlling behavior and encouraged Ekaterina to leave her marriage. The police investigated Ekaterina's marriage and discovered several concerning details, including Ekaterina's desire to divorce Todd, her meeting with a divorce attorney, and her separation from Todd. The police suspected Todd of being behind the mysterious flyer incident at Ekaterina's workplace. Their suspicion grew stronger when they discovered that Todd had test-driven a black Jetta, similar to the car involved in the flyer incident, around the same time it occurred. When the police informed Ekaterina's family that Todd was the prime suspect in her murder and was already in custody, they were shocked and devastated. Ekaterina's mother, Vicky, was particularly affected, feeling physically ill at the thought that Todd could be responsible for her daughter's murder. The police also discovered that Todd's financial investment company was facing legal troubles, providing a potential motive for the crime. Ekaterina was the sole breadwinner for her family since Todd was unemployed. The police suspected that Todd might have motive to kill his wife, as he would gain access to their funds if she left him and their daughters. To gather evidence, the police obtained a search warrant for the couple's home. During the search, they found a baseball bat in the garage with brays of blood on it, which led them to believe it might be the murder weapon. The autopsy revealed that Ekaterina's injuries were consistent with blunt force trauma, suggesting a bat was used. A DNA test confirmed that the blood on the bat was Ekaterina's, linking the bat to the crime. The police also found a clean area under the car, which seemed suspicious. Further examination revealed that the bloodstains matched Ekaterina's DNA profile. 30 days after Ekaterina's murder, Todd was arrested and charged with her killing, bringing relief to her family. At his trial, the prosecution presented evidence that Ekaterina had recently visited a divorce attorney, indicating marital problems. On the night of the murder, Ekaterina had gone to Todd's house to do laundry for a job interview the next morning. The prosecution alleged that Ekaterina told Todd their marriage was over, triggering his violent reaction. They claimed that Todd grabbed a baseball bat, killed Ekaterina in the garage, and then disposed of her body by throwing it off a bridge at Rock River. The jury found Todd guilty and sentenced him to 55 years in prison. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Jessica Lunsford. In the quiet town of Homosassa, Florida, a young girl named Jessica Marie Lunsford was abducted from her home in the middle of the night. She was just 9 years old, full of innocence and dreams for the future. Her abduction sent shockwaves through the community and exposed a grave failure in the system meant to protect children. As news of Jessica's disappearance spread, a massive search effort was launched. Law enforcement, volunteers, and concerned citizens thoroughly searched the area, desperately hoping to bring her back safely. Jessica's family and friends, filled with anguish and fear, clung to hope while recounting stories of her contagious laughter, vibrant personality, and the joy she had brought into their lives. Days had passed, turning into weeks, and the search grew more intense. The tragedy of Jessica's disappearance highlighted the importance of community vigilance and the need for swift action in cases involving missing children. Law enforcement agencies worked tirelessly to uncover the truth, following leads and leaving no stone unturned. Their dedication to finding Jessica and bringing those responsible to justice became paramount. This is the story of Jessica Marie Lunsford, a young girl whose life was tragically cut short, but whose memory continues to inspire change. Jessica Marie Lunsford was born on October 6, 1995, and lived most of her life in North Carolina with her parents, Mark and Angela. When she was born, she had a few older teenage siblings. She was considered a miracle baby, as her mother Angela had suffered a few miscarriages before her birth. However, her parents divorced a year after she was born, and her father was granted full custody. For most of her life, she was the only child living with her father, and the two were very close, like best friends. Mark worked in construction and sometimes couldn't afford a babysitter, so he would bring his daughter to work with him. She would hang out, talk to his co-workers, and play with wood chips, and everyone loved her. Eventually, her grandparents moved to Homosassa, Florida, to be with them. They would go shopping and play games together. They would also take her out and go to karaoke, as Jessica wanted to be a musician. She was inspired by her two favorite artists, Pink and Shania Twain. Her career interests changed frequently because she loved to do many things, including acting and working in fashion. Her dream of working in fashion was inspired by her grandmother, who often took her shopping to fabric stores and also sewed clothes for her dolls. Jessica was an outgoing, affectionate, and friendly girl who loved hugs and cuddling and treated everyone with love and kindness. One day, when Jessica was 9 years old, her father had a date with a woman he had not dated since his divorce from Angela, so he was very happy about it. He left Jessica with her grandparents, who would put her to bed when he wasn't home. He went out to meet his date and ended up staying the night at her house. When he showed up the following morning to take Jessica to school, he heard Jessica's alarm ringing and was surprised that she hadn't shut it off yet. He then went to her room and found her bed empty. Her school clothes were untouched. She was nowhere in the house, and she wasn't outside. That's when he realized he had forgotten to lock the door after he had left. Mark became anxious and contacted the police to report that Jessica was missing. After finishing the call, he reached out to every person he knew and inquired if they had seen or heard from her. Her grandparents had not seen her since they had put her to bed. And her grandfather did not check on her when he woke up at 3 a.m. to use the bathroom. The police issued a nationwide alert about the missing 9-year-old girl and received assistance from 100 people who went out to search for her. The police asked if it was possible that she had run away to look for her mother, whom she had not seen for 4 years, but Mark said she would never do that. She would never just go off searching for her mother, and besides, her mother lived in a different state. Police tried to rule out every possible scenario before assuming it was an abduction case. They also asked if she might have engaged in any online conversations with strangers. As this was the early 2000s, when online chat rooms and the associated dangers were becoming a new problem. Mark said no, she's 9 years old and does not participate in any of that online internet activity. Mark also noticed that a purple dolphin stuffed animal, which he had won for Jessica at a fair just a few weeks earlier and which Jessica loved, was missing. This led the police to confirm that it was most likely a case of abduction. The police accessed the sex offender registry and conducted a search for all sex offenders and pedophiles in the area, performing door-to-door interviews to gather information, check for any suspicious activity, and obtain alibis. The investigators had a significant task ahead of them, as their registry search identified 208 sex offenders they needed to look into. Mark and Jessica's grandfather were questioned and considered possible suspects. It was distressing for them to sit through 3 days of repeated interrogation and questioning about whether they were involved in Jessica's disappearance, if they had harmed her, given her away, or were in any way responsible. They were deeply concerned as they cared greatly for Jessica. Her father was her closest friend, and her grandfather adored her. Being treated as suspects was heartbreaking. They both underwent polygraph tests, which they passed, even though such tests are not entirely reliable and are not admissible as evidence in court. Angela had not seen her daughter in years and had even remarried and had a child. She had not heard anything about Jessica missing. The police were running out of leads, and everything had started to feel hopeless. Until they visited the home of 46-year-old John Cooey, one of the sex offenders. John Cooey was a dangerous man who had several convictions, including a dozen robbery charges, and was also a registered sex offender. During the investigation, he had an outstanding warrant for his arrest for being in possession of cannabis. When the police went to his home, they found out that he had relocated without informing the police, which is a federal violation. Sex offenders are required to inform the police whenever they relocate, so that the information can be updated in the sex offender registry. With a few family members, the police went to the trailer where John's sister lived. His sister informed the police that he was living with them, but she was not sure where he was at the moment. Nevertheless, what the police did not know was that they were just a few feet away from Jessica at that time, while she was still alive. During the period, they were questioning John's family concerning his whereabouts. The police entered the house and looked through some doors, but they were not allowed to search further at that moment. The frightened young girl was sitting in the dark closet of John's bedroom, not making any noise, as she was instructed by him to remain quiet and stay in the closet regardless of what occurred. It is unfortunate that Jessica was very close to being rescued. If only the closet door had been opened after the weekend when Jessica had first gone missing. Police came to check on John once again. His niece had given him money for a bus ticket, but didn't know where he was going. John was a prime suspect, as he had been running away just a few days after Jessica had originally gone missing, which raised red flags for the police, along with the fact that his sister's trailer was located around 100 yards away from Jessica's home. They finally found John at a homeless shelter, where he had used his real name to sign in. He told the police he was there to find work. He was questioned about Jessica, but claimed he had no idea what happened to the girl and had never known of her existence until he saw the news. The police had to release him at that particular time, as they had no grounds to hold him. They released him on March 12th, a few weeks after Jessica had gone missing. The officers later obtained a search warrant to look through his sister's trailer. In his bedroom, inside his closet, the police found a mattress with blood stains. DNA testing on the mattress matched that of Jessica's. John was immediately arrested and charged with the kidnapping and murder of Jessica Lansford. On March 18, 2005, John Cooey made a confession to the police. He had initially intended to break in and rob the home, but he made too much noise, and Jessica woke up and saw him. Panicked, he was afraid that she would inform on him, as she had seen his face. Without thinking, he grabbed her and put his hand over her mouth, telling her not to scream. He informed her that she had to go with him, but before leaving, she requested if she could get her preferred stuffed animal, which he agreed to. She returned with the purple dolphins that her father had won for her at the fair. Once they reached his home, he sexually assaulted her and told her to stay in his bed and not leave the room, and they fell asleep. The following morning, he sexually assaulted her again, instructing her not to make any noise and never come out under any circumstances, as there would be negative consequences if she did. Then he left for work. When he returned home, he discovered that the police were asking questions and knew he had to take action. He was unsure whether to let her go back home because he feared returning to prison. Instead, when the house was empty, he sexually assaulted Jessica one last time and told her he would take her back home to her father, but she had to comply with his demands. He opened 2 large plastic garbage bags and told her to get inside, along with her stuffed animal. He informed her that he would drop her off at her house and she could break free from the bags. However, he dug a hole approximately 3 feet deep, buried her alive, and then escaped. It was very sad because John would have been caught digging a hole and placing her body inside it if the view wasn't completely blocked off by a giant tent that the police put up near Jessica's home in case something happened and they were needed right away. This had the opposite effect. Jessica could have been saved, but the chance was gone. After retrieving the body from the ground, the medical examiner discovered that Jessica had used her last breath of strength to try and free herself by poking 2 of her fingers through the plastic bags, and her 2 fingers were skeletonized. The medical examiner said that she had run out of air and suffocated after roughly 1 to 3 minutes of being on the ground, and the rest of the body had average to severe decomposition. Initially, the judge had ruled that John's confession would be inadmissible in court, as he confessed without his lawyer present. However, the trial court decided that all evidence gathered after the confession, including the discovery of the body, autopsy report, and incriminating statements made by him to investigators and a jail guard, would be admissible in court. John's trial had to be held in Miami, as they could not find an impartial jury in Homosassa. On March 7, 2007, John was found guilty of the following crimes: first-degree murder, kidnapping, assault or battery on a person, burglary, and sexual battery. He was sentenced to death, but on September 30, 2009, before his sentence could be carried out, he died of natural causes, approximately 2 years after murdering Jessica. Jessica's family, who endured unimaginable pain and grief, became advocates for stronger laws and measures to protect children. Their unwavering commitment to ensuring that no other family experiences such a tragedy is a testament to their love for Jessica. Jessica will be remembered as a sociable, caring, and warm-hearted girl who loved hugs and embraced and treated everyone with love and generosity. Jessica's story sparked a nationwide conversation about the safety of our children, prompting communities to come together, demanding reforms and raising awareness about the importance of protecting and cherishing every child. The investigation into Jessica's abduction led to changes in legislation, ensuring that sex offenders are closely monitored and that law enforcement agencies have the necessary tools to prevent similar incidents from occurring in the future. As we remember Jessica, we honor her memory by continuing to work towards a world where every child can grow up in safety and security. Her spirit lives on through the actions and advocacy of those inspired by her story. In the end, Jessica Marie Lunsford's legacy will serve as a powerful reminder that we must remain vigilant in protecting our children. May her memory inspire us to create a society where every child can thrive, free from harm. On September 29, 2006, in St. Patrick's Church in Glasgow, United Kingdom, detectives discovered the body of a young woman. Little did they know, this crime was just the tip of the iceberg. Their investigation led them to one of the ruthless serial offenders in the country. Peter Britton Tobin was born on August 27, 1946, in Johnstone, Scotland. He was the youngest of 8 children in the family of Marjorie and Daniel Tobin. Early on, Peter exhibited a difficult character, prompting his parents to send him to a boarding school in 1953 when he was just 7 years old. However, this seemingly did not yield much benefit. Later on, he was sent to a correctional institution. After completing this period, Peter moved to Brighton, England. There he started a relationship with Margaret Mount, a 17-year-old typist who found his personality irresistible. In August 1969, they got married. However, Peter soon revealed his cruel and controlling nature. Besides that, he was involved in criminal activities and was convicted and imprisoned for theft and forgery a year later. This led Margaret to divorce him in 1973. In the same year, Peter married Sylvia Jeffrey, a local nurse who also fell for his charm. That year they had their first son and named him Ian. Tragically, their daughter Claire died shortly after birth in 1974. Grieving over their lost child and suffering from Peter's abusive treatment led Sylvia to leave in 1976 with their young son. Decades later, when Peter was in his 40s, he pursued new romance again, this time with Kathy Wilson, who was only 16 years old at that time, vulnerable and impressionable, which made it easy for him. Together, they had a son named Daniel, the couple's only child. They married in 1989 and moved to Scotland. It proved challenging. Kathy couldn't go outside freely due to her husband's control over every aspect of her life. His violent behavior continued, reaching significant levels. Consequently, isolation exacerbated her living conditions. The young woman mustered the courage and chose to flee with her son in the late 1990s. It's uncertain if Kathy's departure triggered the worst aspects of the man's character to emerge. However, from this moment on, Peter unleashed a terrible side of himself upon the world, ready to cause much harm. Unfortunately, his path intersected with that of a lovely girl named Vicky Hamilton. Vicky was born in Scotland in 1976. She was the second child of Michael and Janet Hamilton, a married couple who had previously welcomed their firstborn daughter Sharon. Later, Lee and Lindsay joined the family. Nevertheless, serious disagreements between the spouses led to divorce being the most appropriate decision. Vicky, Lee, and Lindsay stayed under their mother's care and moved to South London. The eldest daughter, Sharon, remained in Bathgate, BTHG, but this distance didn't hinder Vicky and Sharon from maintaining their close relationship. When Vicky turned 15, Sharon saw it as a good opportunity for her sister to take a step towards independence, a desire many teenagers have. After traveling alone by bus to Scotland for a weekend visit, Vicky was supposed to return home to her mother's house. It marked her first solo trip by bus. Sharon viewed it as a small yet significant adventure. On Saturday, February 9th, 1991, the sisters went shopping and engaged in continuous conversation. Sunday was typical, except that Vicky felt apprehensive about her return trip. The evening of February 10th was cold and snowy. Vicky ensured she had enough money for the fare and reviewed the bus route one last time with her sister before they hugged each other tightly. Standing at the bus stop, snacking on a bag of chips across from the police station, it was there Vicky's path crossed with Peter's fatefully. He forcibly dragged her into his car and committed unspeakable acts, raping her and then taking her life either out of malice or to prevent her from reporting him. Peter retained possession of the girl's purse. When Vicky did not arrive at her mother's house and there was no communication from her, her family began searching for her frantically in desperation. Simultaneously, they alerted the authorities about her absence. Once the police began investigating the disappearance, V's face became one of the most recognizable in Scotland. The search operation grew into one of the largest in the country's history. Amidst this uproar, Peter opted to relocate to southeast England, specifically to Margate, where he settled into a charming house with a garden. There, Peter brought Vicky's lifeless body. He wrapped her remains in plastic and concealed them beneath a layer of concrete. He then covered everything with soil. Neighbors thought he had dug a sandbox for his young son, who was 3 years old at the time. Peter's name never surfaced during the initial investigation into Vicky's disappearance. The police found no leads on Vicky's whereabouts and considered her a likely runaway, viewing her as an unhappy teenager due to her parents' divorce. Their theory of voluntary disappearance was reinforced on February 21, 1991, when Vicky's purse was discovered near the main bus station in Edinburgh. Peter, always one step ahead of authorities, created this false lead and completely diverted the course of the investigation. Detectives spent 2 fruitless months searching in London. It is known that Vicky's mother died soon after. Over the next decade, Vicky's family and town residents continued to follow the case closely, but despite listing more than 7,000 names in the file, taking nearly 4,000 statements, and presenting about 500 documents along with 380 potential pieces of physical evidence, all efforts led to a dead end. The case was eventually shelved. The next young woman who encountered Peter was Dina McNichol from Essex. She had a brother and 3 sisters. Her father was a jazz musician, and her mother had tragically died many years prior in a car accident. By age 18, Dina was known as good-hearted and cheerful, a wonderful friend. She had just completed high school and held great hopes for her future. On one hand, possibly, she aimed to take a gap year for travel. On the other hand, she aspired to attend university. However, nothing was certain, because although Dina had applied to several institutions of higher education, she hadn't yet received any responses. During the first weekend of August 1991, Dina attended a music festival in Hampshire. There, she met a young man named David Tremlett. Between dances, they discovered they liked each other. On Sunday, August 4th, they spent the night together in a tent. The following day, Dina assisted him in dismantling the tent, and they agreed to hitchhike back home separately. However, since part of their route was the same, they decided to hitchhike together. Tired but happy, the young couple hit the road to catch a ride. That's when Peter appeared and offered them a lift. David got out of the car first, and Dina wrote down his phone number before saying goodbye. Alone with the unknown driver, Dina was about to experience a real nightmare. On that same Monday, August 5th, 1991, Peter repeated his previous crime as with Vicky. He used Dina's scarf as a gag. After committing the crime, Peter withdrew money from Dina's account at ATMs in Hampshire and Sussex. When her relatives noticed someone withdrawing money from her account, they immediately suspected something was wrong. Her family knew how carefully she saved every penny and what she planned to use that money for, either traveling or continuing her education. Days and weeks went by with no word from Dina. The worst part for her family was living in uncertainty. Though unspoken aloud, everyone was sure something terrible had happened. After all, if Dina were alive, she would have returned home or called to explain her absence. As for Peter, he left Margate without saying goodbye or explaining anything. Later in 1993, he settled in Hampshire, specifically in a rented apartment in Leek Park. He argued that he wanted to be closer to his son. On August 4, 1993, two 14-year-olds went to visit a local woman, but found she wasn't home. They decided to ask other neighbors if they had seen her around instead. As a result, they knocked on Peter's door. The man saw a unique opportunity and invited them into his home to wait for the force they were looking for. They saw that the man's 5-year-old son was in there, mistook him for a friendly person, and agreed to enter. There is another version about the reasons for this meeting, which suggests it was not accidental. The two girls came to Peter's home in response to a request for a babysitter that the man had made. They trusted him because when they arrived, they saw his son and stayed to look after him. Everyone agrees that when the child fell asleep, Peter tied them up, threatened them with a knife, and forced them to drink alcohol. He then beat and raped them, injuring one of the girls. Just when they thought their lives would end at the hands of this extremely cruel man, a boy woke up. This saved them from suffering the same fatal fate that befell Vicky and Dina. In an effort to keep his son from realizing what had happened and understanding what kind of father he was, Peter decided to leave the apartment with the child. According to some reports, Peter left around 2 a.m., but before that he turned on the gas in the kitchen, hoping to complete his monstrous task. However, the girls regained consciousness and managed to escape. They went to the police and reported all the abuses committed by Peter, whom they described in detail. Peter returned his child to his mother and joined a religious sect called the Communion of Jesus under a false name. He hoped to go unnoticed there, but in the meantime, media published his photograph provided by police, making his face widely known. Due to mass media coverage, information about this man started pouring in, and his car was also identified thanks to BBC Crime Watch program. He was located, and after 40 days on the run, he was captured in Brighton. He appeared in court on May 18, 1994, where he pleaded guilty to sexual assault and indecent acts against 2 young girls, and was sentenced to 14 years in prison. However, Peter did not serve his full sentence and was released in 2014 at the age of 58, immediately after his release from prison. He went back to Scotland, aiming to relocate from the area where he was registered as a sex offender. For a while, he managed to stay off the radar until 6. Under a false name and posing as a homeless person, he knocked on the door of the Church of St. Patrick in Glasgow. To avoid getting exposed, he adopted the name Peter McLaughlin. Dennis and Katie Curran, a married couple from the church's charitable group, recall that evening vividly when a homeless man sought shelter. Despite his vulnerable appearance, Katie had an uneasy feeling about him. Peter was brought up as a Catholic and soon felt at ease in this church. His apparent begging served as an effective disguise because it only aroused sympathy from parishioners, with few paying much attention to him. Consequently, he roamed freely around the church, an ideal hiding place for him. However, his predatory instincts stayed intact. Being in a sacred place held no significance for him. Calculating every move meticulously, Peter displayed eagerness to assist in church repairs. After about 6 or 7 weeks, he asked the priest if he could join the maintenance staff. At that time, people facing financial difficulties often sought refuge in churches. It was through such circumstances that Angelica Clark crossed paths with Peter. Angelica was a 23-year-old woman from Poland who came to Scotland during the summer of 2006. She wanted to spend her summer break working to earn money and fund her language studies back home. She lived at the parish house of St. Patrick's Church, where she also worked as a cleaner. Peter took an immediate liking to her and somehow convinced her to help him with various tasks occasionally. On Sunday, September 24, 2006, Angelica spent several hours assisting him in painting a shed. Some parishioners noticed them together before Peter attacked her at the back of the chapel. Leica Brown, 47, and her husband Andrew, 46, who lived in a multi-story house overlooking the church, heard a woman scream through their open windows. In her statement afterward, Leica described it as a brief scream that sounded like someone being forcibly restrained. It was so eerie that it compelled her to get up from the couch and approach the window. but she saw nothing. The scream heard by the Browns coincided with the moment when Peter caught the young girl off guard as she stood her back to him. He struck her forcefully and dragged her to the back of the chapel, where he continued to beat her. After she lost consciousness, he raped her and then inflicted several knife wounds. He hid the body in the basement under the floor near the confessional. At this point, Angelica was still alive. Several hours passed, and parishioners began to notice that the young girl was missing. That's when Dennis informed his wife, Katie, about Angelica's unusual disappearance. The police quickly initiated an investigation and started interviewing members of the community one by one. During these interviews, it came to light that Peter was the last person seen with Angelica, albeit disguised as Pete, a homeless laborer. Eventually, he became the prime suspect. Officers went to question him, but found no evidence linking him directly to Angelica's disappearance, so they continued their investigation. Aware that it was only a matter of time before they discovered the body and traced everything back to him, Peter fled to London. By this time, Detective David Swindle had joined the investigation. He soon began to suspect that this case wasn't merely a disappearance. Based on their findings and collected testimonies, Detective Swindle believed it was unlikely Angelica would be found alive. Finally, on September 29, 2006, authorities discovered her body in the chapel. This news shocked British society due to both the nature of the crime and the location chosen by the perpetrator for hiding the body. Examining the girl's injuries led Detective David to suspect that this wasn't Peter's first crime. However, he didn't yet know how horrific and dangerous this individual turned out to be. Further revelations were inevitable. DNA found at the crime scene and on Angelica matched data in the United Kingdom's National Criminal Intelligence Database. That's when they learned exactly who they were dealing with. A man whose actions indicated deep-seated brutality and criminal sophistication. The individual they were looking for turned out to be Peter Tobin, whose fingerprints had been discovered at the crime scene. Consequently, the first step for the authorities was to publish his photograph in the media. His image was distributed nationwide, and the Scottish police reached out to the Metropolitan Police, initiating a search across the United Kingdom. Meanwhile, in London, Peter attempted to conceal himself by going to a hospital and pretending he had heart problems. He claimed he had chest pain and weakness on the left side of his body. Identifying himself as a plumber named James Kelly, he was examined by Dr. Nick Lasso. However, something about his demeanor and behavior raised concerns for the doctor. Initially avoiding eye contact, a behavior atypical of most patients, Peter became suspicious when tests failed to reveal any clear physical cause for his alleged pain. The doctor's suspicions were confirmed by a nurse who recognized Peter from a photograph that had been circulating in the media. As a result, both the nurse and doctor contacted the police. This phone call significantly altered the course of the investigation. On September 30th, police officer Alan Murray was dispatched to the hospital in London. Peter was taken into a room so Alan could speak with him. Immediately following this encounter, Peter was arrested. Although initially only charged with violating the sex offender registry, this approach allowed officers time to build a criminal case against him. Under Detective David's leadership, evidence gathered led to Peter's trial for crimes against Angelica in late March 2007. Despite substantial evidence against him, Peter denied committing violent acts against her, claiming instead they engaged in consensual sexual activity. He also denied providing false information to police and hospital staff. After 6 weeks of legal proceedings characterized by lies and manipulations on Peter's part, the truth finally prevailed. He was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment, but with the possibility of parole after 21 years. Detective David and his team were convinced that there was more to Peter's story. While the trial was ongoing, detectives delved into Peter's life. They gathered additional evidence and compiled a dossier. This was done with the involvement of various law enforcement agencies across the country. To avoid harming or interfering with Angelica's case, they preferred to conduct their work confidentially. The joint police operation was known as Anagram. Part of their work involved connecting missing persons cases to places where Peter had been. During these investigations, they established two precise links, one in Bathgate and another in Margate. Several weeks later, a search was conducted in Peter's old house on the coast. They found a knife with DNA samples hidden in the attic. However, there was nothing else there. Then they went to the house where Peter lived in Margate. There, it became clear they were dealing with a serious criminal offender. Investigators dug up a sandbox in the garden of the house, one that Peter had made for his son. And shockingly enough, they found a female body there. But that wasn't all. When they continued searching at the same location, they found another body. A woman's handbag was also discovered at the scene, which the team preserved for DNA analysis. Forensic experts worked diligently to establish the identities of the two victims, determine their ages, and estimate their dates of death. They also analyzed traces from the handbag. These genetic traces were very strong, but initially yielded no matches in the national DNA database. However, on June 1, 2007, there was a crucial breakthrough. The DNA matched Peter's fingerprint. This development proved monumental for investigators who deemed it necessary to move forward decisively in this direction by November. On August 14, 2007, authorities confirmed that one of the bodies found belonged to Vicky Hamilton, who disappeared at 15 years old during her first independent. Her family had been waiting for answers for 16 years. Later, it was announced that the second body belonged to 18-year-old Dinah McNichol, who was hitchhiking home after attending a concert. On September 1, 2008, the Royal Prosecution Service contacted Peter's lawyers and charged him with the murder of Vicky, leading to his trial. Officers had to restrain Vicky's father, Michael, after he saw Peter face to face. Michael later admitted he simply wanted Peter to know he was there to defend his daughter's name and protect her memory. After a month-long trial on December 2, 2008, Peter was found guilty of Vicky's murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. The trial for Dinah took place in December 2009. On December 16th, after the defense failed to provide evidence exonerating their client, the jury found Peter guilty of Dinah's murder. He subsequently received his third life sentence. On November 22, 2007, it was reported that Tobin had been attacked by fellow inmates. He sustained minor injuries. Shortly before this incident, the serial killer had confessed to a total of 11 murders. Recently, on October 8, 2022, Peter passed away in the hospital. Hello friends, today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Luz Maria Lopez. Luz Maria Lopez was born on March 17, 1995, in the small town of San Cristobal Verapaz. Her family was simple and modest. Her parents were A. Morales and Brian Lopez. Luz Maria was the youngest of two children. She grew up with her older brother, Omar. As an infant, she faced a life-threatening intestinal obstruction. To save her, doctors performed a complex operation without guarantees of success. Her mother prayed fervently for her recovery and firmly believed that her daughter would pull through, and she did. The surgery at such an early age did not impact Luz Maria's development. Throughout her school years, Luz Maria actively engaged in sports, especially gymnastics and athletics. She also had a passion for classical choreography. Her creative nature made it easy for her to communicate and connect with different people, quickly forming friendships. Academically inclined towards the humanities, she excelled in her studies. After finishing school, Luz Maria contemplated higher education and opted for a prestigious state university. She decided to pursue a law degree and later specialized in criminalistics due to her genuine interest in this field. A significant moment occurred during her student years when Luz Maria and her mother visited a car dealership in Coban, the capital of Alta Verapaz. It was Omar's 25th birthday that year, and they wanted to gift him something special, a motorcycle he had always dreamed of. At the showroom, a polite and attentive young consultant named Jorge welcomed them. He showed them various models and provided recommendations. Mother and daughter chose a model but wanted to consult with the head of the family before finalizing their decision. They left with a business card from the dealership and Luz Maria's phone number for future reference. Soon after, Jorge called Luz Maria, not about the motorcycle, but on a more personal note. Over time, these calls became frequent until Jorge mustered the courage to ask her out for coffee. It was clear that he had a strong attraction to the beautiful, sultry brunette, but he was unsure how to initiate their acquaintance. Luz Maria also found this handsome young man appealing. When he proposed they meet, she agreed readily. Although the young man was a year younger than her, this slight difference didn't hinder their growing connection. Their romantic relationship blossomed almost immediately. Both felt it was love at first sight and believed in a future filled with happiness together. After only a few months, the couple chose to live together, despite their parents' disapproval of such haste. Soon after, they were married. Approximately 6 months later, they held a wedding ceremony, inviting only their closest friends and family to celebrate with them. However, issues arose on the day of the wedding. The banquet venue encountered a problem, which almost disrupted the entire event. The couple had to pay a significant additional amount to ensure the celebration proceeded as planned. Little is known about Jorge, Luz Maria's chosen partner. Born in 1996 in Santa Catalina Latina in central Guatemala, Jorge was the eldest of 2 sons and grew up with his brother Pablo. Their family often faced financial hardships, balancing on the edge of poverty. Thus, there wasn't enough money for luxurious clothes or expensive toys. It barely covered necessities. Despite these challenges, Jorge lacked aspirations for a better life and didn't focus on studying or securing a decent job. People who knew Jorge personally described him as withdrawn and sometimes even aggressive due to his trouble controlling emotions. Consequently, he didn't have many friends and struggled with relationships. Nonetheless, meeting his dream girl sparked determination within him. He worked hard to win her love and hurried to marry her out of fear she might change her mind. It's worth mentioning that Luz Maria's parents were skeptical about their son-in-law right from the beginning. Overall, despite some initial challenges and doubts from others around them, their connection remained strong and unwavering. Something about this young man didn't sit right with them. They couldn't pinpoint it, and they couldn't convince their daughter not to marry him. Soon after the wedding, she became pregnant. Without a university degree, finding a good job was tough. Employers didn't want to hire someone inexperienced and expecting a baby, so she had to settle odd jobs. Her husband, by that time, had lost his job too, and wasn't eager to find a new one. When their daughter Alice was born, money became really tight. With both of them unemployed, they struggled to pay rent or even buy food and basic necessities. Then Jorge suggested moving in with his parents temporarily. Luz Maria Lopez resisted for a long while, but eventually agreed. They couldn't stay on the streets with a baby. Luz Maria Lopez's mother was aware of her daughter's family issues and often urged her to come back home. But Luz Maria Lopez kept saying things would get better with her husband, and there was no need to worry. One day, the mother decided to visit her daughter and granddaughter at her son-in-law's parents' house and found a distressing scene. Luz Maria Lopez was in terrible shape, eating just once a day, and that too very little. However, Jorge's family didn't see the need to provide for their unemployed daughter-in-law. It's terrible. Luz Maria Lopez was breastfeeding Alice, so lack of proper nutrition threatened both their healths. But inadequate meals were only part of the myriad problems she faced in her mother-in-law's home, as she later discovered. She was constantly humiliated and even beaten by her husband's younger brother. He was irritated by the crying of the child and the presence of items in the house. His frustration him to repeatedly throw these items at Maria. On one occasion, he launched a baby bottle that struck little Alice, who was in her mother's arms. Jorge witnessed all of this, but never once stood up for his wife and daughter, acting as if they were strangers to him. Maria's mother persuaded her to take her granddaughter and return to the parents' house. Soon after, Jorge appeared at their doorstep, asking his wife to come back, promising he would find employment. She agreed, but only on the condition that they would rent an apartment and live separately from Jorge's parents. When Maria successfully defended her diploma, she fulfilled a long-time dream by securing a job with the city prosecutor's office. A smart, talented, and responsible young woman, she quickly earned the respect of her colleagues and began moving up the career ladder. Over time, the family's financial situation improved considerably. They could even afford to buy a car for two. However, this improvement was solely due to Maria's diligent work and reputation. Jorge was still searching for himself and preferred living at his wife's expense. He was jealous, lazy, and a domestic type with an explosive temper, which worsened over time. Jorge did not want to work, taking only temporary part-time jobs, if at all. He preferred sitting at home in front of the TV, drinking beer with friends, and spending what his wife earned. Moreover, Jorge was pathologically jealous and tried to control every move of his beloved. He did not permit her to make friends or have lunch with colleagues in cafes or just be somewhere without him. Constantly checking her phone records and reading messages became routine for him. He also forbade her from registering accounts on social networks. At home, when left alone with Maria, Jorge's behavior did not improve in any way. He often created scandals in seemingly calm places, constantly clarified his relationships, and habitually blamed his wife for any problems or family troubles. When they lived at his parents' house, Jorge never stood up for his wife. He just watched as she was humiliated, insulted, and occasionally even beaten by his relatives. Jorge himself also sometimes resorted to violence and didn't see anything wrong with it. He treated Luz Maria as if she were his property, believing she would endure everything and wouldn't leave him. Neighbors frequently heard screams from their home and saw signs of beatings on the young woman's face and body. Luz Maria repeatedly tried to leave her husband and considered filing for divorce. Several times, she took her daughter and moved out to live with her parents. However, each time, her husband would go there, literally begging on his knees for forgiveness. Remarkably, each time Luz Maria forgave him and gave him another chance despite her parents urging her to come to her senses and leave the abusive man. On December 15, 2020, after another violent altercation with Jorge, Luz Maria took their 3-year-old daughter Alice, got into the car in tears, and went to her mother's house. The following day, Jorge arrived there. His intentions were unclear, whether he wanted his wife back or simply the car. He claimed he had found a job and assured everyone that their lives would change. Additionally, he promised never to raise a hand against his wife again. Surprisingly, Luz Maria believed him yet again and returned with him to their rented apartment. In mid-January 2021, Luz Maria called her mother to complain that not only did Jorge fail to secure a job as promised, but had also stolen the money she earned, effectively leaving the family destitute. Her mother felt sorry for her daughter and offered financial help so they could get by until the next salary was received. The women agreed to meet on the morning of January 19th, but Luz Maria did not arrive at the designated time. She decided to visit her daughter's workplace the next day. Upon arrival, she discovered that Luz Maria Lopez hadn't shown up for 2 days, and no one had been able to contact her. At the same time, Jorge, also searching for his wife, appeared at the prosecutor's office. He mentioned that they had argued again and thought Luz Maria Lopez had gone to her mother's house. He figured she wasn't answering because she was upset with him. The concerned mother immediately felt something was wrong and suspected her son-in-law might be lying. She went straight to the police to initiate a search for Luz Maria Lopez without delay. That same day, an alert system named Isabel Claudina, originally Alerta Isabel Claudina, was activated nationwide. This emergency system was triggered for young women reported missing. When the extensive search began, Luz Maria Lopez's husband was quickly identified as the prime suspect, though it would actually be more accurate to say he was the only suspect. Luz Maria Lopez had no known enemies or reasons someone would kidnap her, and Jorge was the last person seen with her alive. Naturally, he denied any involvement in her disappearance, asserting that he himself was distraught over her absence and irritated by being labeled as the main suspect. Despite his denials, Jorge repeatedly contradicted himself during questioning and failed to provide a clear explanation as to why he hadn't informed the police on the actual day of his wife's disappearance. He claimed he believed she was at his mother-in-law's home, but didn't call or visit there. While law enforcement searched for witnesses and combed through areas for any clues, a breakthrough came on January 22nd. Municipal workers accidentally discovered Luz Maria Lopez's body while responding to a call about a clogged storm drain near a road. Upon lifting the grate to access the drain, they found an unusual large plastic bag containing something black inside. Upon closer inspection, the observers were horrified to discover charred human remains. They promptly reported this gruesome finding to the authorities. Upon arrival, the police officers speculated that the body might belong to Luz Maria Lopez, who was widely looking for after nationwide. Forensic experts later verified that the remains were indeed those of a young woman. Her parents and brother, despite the severe disfigurement caused by the fire, confirmed her identity with certainty. What's coincident is that the package containing her remains was found on the same street as the prosecutor's office where she had worked. This location lacked surveillance cameras and lighting. Despite how badly burned the body was, pathologists determined that she had been severely beaten before death. The cause of death was asphyxia, indicated by internal hemorrhages, multiple fractures sustained while she was still alive, and particles of dried blood in her nose and mouth. Additionally, there were deep marks on her neck, pointing to strangulation. At the time of discovery, no new suspects had emerged in the investigation. The victim's parents firmly believed that their son-in-law had brutally murdered their daughter. Consequently, Jorge was taken into custody while authorities examined his motive for committing such a heinous act. In addition to the investigation, psychologists and criminal analysts needed to scrutinize the marriage and family dynamics closely. During these proceedings, Ms. Lopez submitted a disturbing audio recording sent anonymously by a neighbor familiar with her daughter's household. This person had frequently witnessed domestic disputes between Luz Maria and her husband, but decided to record one such incident without realizing it would culminate in murder. The audio captured Luz Maria desperately crying for help amid little sobs in the background. Ms. Lopez was horrified by what she heard and lamented that if this witness had alerted authorities earlier, her daughter might still be alive today. The individual who captured the recording did not contact the police, nor did they visit the residence from which the distressing screams emanated. The authorities were unable to trace this anonymous person, making it impossible to involve them as a witness in the investigation. Consequently, the audio recording was included in the criminal materials. A key witness gave a detailed interview urging all citizens to stay vigilant and report incidents of domestic violence to the police, rather than merely documenting them with devices such as cameras. This approach, she stated, could potentially save lives. This crime triggered significant public outrage, prompting thousands to take to the streets in protest, demanding that the perpetrator be brought to justice. Jorge was promptly taken into custody, but persistently denied any wrongdoing. He claimed he personally drove his wife to work on that ill-fated day when she subsequently vanished. Street CCTV footage indeed captured their vehicle heading towards Luz Maria Lopez's workplace that morning. However, due to tinted windows, it was indiscernible how many individuals were inside. None of the video clips showed the car stopping or Luz Maria exiting. Further discoveries were uncovered at the couple's rented home where faint traces of cleaned blood and drag marks were detected. These findings suggested that a violent crime likely occurred there. An additional piece of evidence came when microscopic fragments of burnt flesh were discovered in the trunk of their family car. Moreover, during their search, investigators paid close attention to a recent purchase made by Jorge and his wife, a double orthopedic mattress. It wasn't so much about the mattress itself, but rather its dense polyethylene wrapping, which analysis revealed had been used to transport Luz Maria's burnt remains. Additionally, several neighbors testified about having repeatedly heard Jorge verbally abusing and threatening his wife with death just days before her sudden disappearance. Her husband had shouted that he would kill her if she decided to leave him, and that he would hide her body so that no one would ever find it. Based on the data collected by expert criminologists, as well as the testimony of several witnesses, the investigation presented a gruesome picture of the crime. The murder occurred on the night of January 19, 2021. The day before, the couple had a big fight, and Jorge once again resorted to violence with his fists. He had previously had issues with his temper, but this time, he went into an uncontrollable rage. He struck his wife multiple times, causing her to scream and cry for help. These screams were heard by their neighbors, but nobody called the police. During the beating, Jorge broke his wife's nose and caused a head injury. After this brutal assault, he strangled her with his bare hands and then attempted to dispose of the body. He dragged it into the backyard, doused it with campfire liquid, and set it on fire. However, Jorge did not anticipate how smoky and foul-smelling the burning flesh and hair would be. Concerned that neighbors might notice and call the fire department or police, he quickly extinguished the fire. He wrapped the charred remains in plastic and sought a secluded location where he believed the body would never be found. The most horrific aspect was that Jorge committed these acts in front of their young daughter. Despite her tender age, she somewhat comprehended what was occurring. The child, 3.5 years old at the time, witnessed both the beating and subsequent murder, as evidenced by her cries and screams, which were also recorded. Aware of some forensic techniques from his wife's textbooks at home, a fact due to their abundance, Jorge attempted to cover up his crime and establish an alibi. He found a dark stretch of road without lights or video surveillance cameras and disposed of his wife's body in a drainage sewer there, thinking he could go unnoticed. The next morning, he drove to her place of work along the usual route, as if he had taken Maria there just as he did every morning. The following day, he began to simulate an active search for his wife, calling her colleagues, acquaintances, and relatives. The criminal's lawyers delayed the trial as much as they could. They also attempted to throw the investigation off track. They insisted that all the evidence and witness statements were circumstantial, emphasizing that not a single piece of evidence unequivocally proved Jorge's guilt. Defense attorneys tried to get the detention changed to house arrest. They argued that Jorge himself was deeply depressed due to being accused of killing the woman he loved and the mother of his child. However, decisive evidence came from data obtained from Maria's phone. All this time, the device was in her husband's possession. On the first day after the crime, several messages were sent from it to different people in an attempt to create the appearance that Maria was still alive. Tracking all movements of the smartphone that day showed it was constantly in the same places as Jorge's phone. Despite this evidence, lawyers tried to turn it in favor of their client, claiming Jorge found his wife's phone and drove around with it searching for her. Yet no one could explain why he was sending messages from it or calling it from his own cell phone. Another proof of guilt was bruises and scratches on Jorge's body found on the day of his arrest. These marks were photographed by experts and indicated that Maria clearly resisted. The most vivid was a scratch on his neck. Unfortunately, particles of Jorge's epithelium under Maria's fingernails couldn't be found because they were destroyed by fire. Despite many controversial points, the prosecutor asked for the maximum possible punishment for Jorge. Court hearings and proceedings were repeatedly postponed due to the raging worldwide pandemic. But in October 2022, Jorge was finally found guilty of his wife's brutal murder and sentenced to 50 years in prison. Although he maintained his innocence throughout, custody of little Alice was given to her maternal grandparents, who admitted their granddaughter now holds the main meaning in their lives. This case is of India's first famous perfume expert, Monica Gourde. The reason for Monica's murder and the method used by the killer shook the entire India. The date was actually October 6, 2016. Monica Gourde resided in the village named Sangolda in the famous state of Goa in India. Goa is known for its famous beaches, culture, climate, and historical places. Besides, here you can also get a chance to witness colorful architecture, greenery, and beautiful sunsets daily. Actually, Monica lived in a 3-bedroom rented apartment in a society named Sapna Raj Valley in Sangolda village. As usual, at around 9 to 10 in the morning, Monica's maid arrives at her house and rings the doorbell of Monica's apartment. However, there is no response from inside. Then the maid rings the bell again, but still no response. Then she tries calling out several times and rings the bell 3 or 4 more times. Additionally, she knocks on the door, but still there is no sound from inside and no one opens the door. This situation feels very strange to the maid because Monica has never done this before. Feeling a little anxious now, she calls Monica's brother, Anand Gourde, who lives in Mumbai, and explains the entire situation to him. After this, Monica's brother Anand calls Monica's phone, but there is no response from the other end. He keeps trying to connect with his sister through calls, but Monica doesn't pick up the phone. After that, Anand calls Monica's neighbor, who lived in the adjacent apartment, and Monica had also left a duplicate key to her. Shortly after Anand's call, the woman arrives outside Monica's house with the duplicate key. She then opens the door with the same duplicate key, and as soon as Monica's neighbor and her maid enter the house, both scream because Monica was lying straight on the bed. Her hands were tied behind the bed, and there was no clothing on the lower part of her body. Additionally, Monica was not moving at all. Seeing all this, Monica's neighbor immediately calls the police. Soon after, the Goa police arrive at Monica's apartment with some lady police officers, an ambulance, and doctors. However, when some doctors cover Monica's body and check her pulse, it is found that Monica has passed away. Afterwards, the dead body is sent for postmortem, and then the room is searched. The police searched the room, but the surprising thing was that there was no evidence of forced entry anywhere in the entire apartment. There were eggshells in the room, suggesting they had been eaten recently. Then Monica's purse was checked, but apart from some debit card bills, the police found no evidence in it. Now, to find evidence, the police consider examining all the CCTV footage in the society. But then they find out that there are no CCTV cameras installed in that society. Besides this, the police also question the people living in Sapna Raj Valley. However, nobody has seen any suspicious person entering or leaving Monica's house in the past day. Nevertheless, the police also investigate from the angle of theft. But nothing was missing from Monica's flat that could indicate that this murder was committed for theft. Looking at all these things, the police believe that whoever murdered Monica had some information about her because no one forcefully entered the flat and nothing was stolen from the house. However, Monica was married, but due to some disputes, she had been living alone for a year. Therefore, the police's suspicion first falls on Monica's husband, Bharath Ramanrutham. After that, the police interrogate him about this murder, but nothing comes to light during the interrogation that would make them suspect him. In fact, Monica was the daughter of a former judge in Mumbai, Ramesh Kudur, and she was initially a photographer, but later she started researching on perfumes. After this, in a short span of time, she became a successful perfume expert. Due to her profession, Monica was quite famous not only in her society, but also throughout the city, often seen hobnobbing with big businessmen. Therefore, as soon as news of Monica's murder surfaced, the entire state of Goa was in shock. At that time, this was the news running on every news channel in the country, and the public wanted to know who the mystery killer was. Meanwhile, Monica's postmortem report also arrives, revealing that Monica died due to suffocation, and it also becomes clear that she was raped. Anyway, the police had investigated the case from every angle so far, but they had neither found any suspects nor any clues. But then, during the investigation that evening, a police officer suddenly remembers that they had found some debit card bills from Monica's purse, but they hadn't found any debit card during the entire search. Afterwards, the Goa police approached the bank regarding the bills of that debit card and request to check the transaction details of that card. It is found out that on the morning of October 6th at 6 o'clock, this card was used at an ATM in Porvorim area. Porvorim is merely 4 to 5 kilometers away from Sapnaraj Valley. Following this, the police instruct the bank to keep an eye on this card and also scrutinize the CCTV footage of the ATM in Porvorim. The face of the boy who withdrew money from that card was captured on the ATM camera. Subsequently, with the CCTV footage in hand, the Goa police reach Sapnaraj Valley. As soon as the local see this footage, they recognize the boy shown in the footage immediately and identify him as Raj Kumar, who used to be the old security guard here. However, he was fired from his job 2 months ago on charges of theft. For the Goa police, this was a major success because for the first time in this case, the police had a name and a face of suspect. Now, when the police check Raj Kumar's background, they find out that Raj Kumar, 21, is from Bathinda city in Punjab state, and there have been several theft cases registered against him before. The police had all the information about Raj Kumar, but the challenge now was how to catch him. So, to catch Raj Kumar, the Goa police started waiting for the next transaction from Monica's debit card. Some time passes and suddenly the police find out that recently some money has been withdrawn from an ATM in Bangalore city using this card. Let us tell you that Bangalore city is about 370 miles away from Sangolda village. Upon seeing this, the Goa police immediately spring into action and contact the Bangalore City Police. After that, Bangalore police checked the CCTV footage of that ATM, and Raj Kumar's face was clearly visible in the footage of that ATM as well. Following this, Bangalore police took Raj Kumar's photo and began questioning all hotels and lodges around that ATM. After a while, a man at the reception of one hotel recognizes Raj Kumar's photo and says, "Yes, a man with this face is staying in our hotel, but he has gone out for some work right now." Afterwards, some police officers dressed in civilian clothes stand outside the same hotel, waiting for Raj Kumar to arrive. But as soon as Raj Kumar returns to the hotel after a while, the police officers recognize him and apprehend him. Now, because the police officers were in civilian clothes, Raj Kumar doesn't even recognize them. And just like that, on October 8th, 2016, 2 days after Monica's murder, Raj Kumar is arrested from a hotel in Bangalore. Then Goa police are contacted. Afterwards, the Goa police arrive in Bangalore and take Raj Kumar to Goa with transit remand from the court. Now, the interrogation begins, and due to the firm questioning by the police, Raj Kumar admits to killing Monica. When the police ask him why he did it, he narrates his entire story to the police, and the story goes something like this. Actually, in the month of June, 39-year-old Monica decides to shift to Goa for her perfume business, for which Monica starts looking for a rented flat, and on June 7th, 2016, she reaches Sapnaraj Valley to see a flat. At the society's gate, Monica meets security guard Raj Kumar, and the society's management had already called Raj Kumar beforehand, informing him that a woman would come to see a flat, so show her the flat. Afterwards, Raj Kumar shows Monica the flat, and after seeing it, Monica leaves from there. But what happens here is that during showing the flat, Raj Kumar falls in love with Monica unilaterally. Now, day and night, he kept thinking only about Monica. About 4 to 5 days pass like this, and then one day Raj Kumar becomes very happy because that day Monica had come to shift to Sapnaraj Valley with her belongings. After that, Monica tells Raj Kumar that the flat he showed her, he has taken that flat. Now, because Raj Kumar was very happy, he himself, with the help of 2 people, delivers Monica's belongings to her apartment. Raj Kumar does this because he wanted to see Monica repeatedly, but because he was a security guard, he didn't get many chances to see and meet Monica. But then one day an idea comes to his mind, and he goes to his manager and says that he wants to do the cleaning and maintenance work of the society's cars along with his duty, because he is in desperate need of money. After hearing Rajkumar's need, the manager also agrees to his proposal because he thinks that this way Rajkumar will earn some extra money and the needs of the people living in the society will also be fulfilled. However, Rajkumar had something else in his mind, and after this, he goes straight to Monica's apartment. After that, he tells Monica that now he can also clean her car, but it will cost her some extra money. Monica also agrees to this because she didn't have enough time to do household chores while handling her business. Now Rajkumar started cleaning Monica's car and would use the pretext of exchanging keys to also visit Monica's apartment, where he would see Monica 3 or 4 times a day. But it was due to the cleaning of this very car that one day Rajkumar loses his job. It so happened that one day Monica's umbrella went missing from his car. Monica asks Rajkumar about it, but he says he didn't see any umbrella in the car. After this, Monica complains to the society management and says that today, not only my umbrella, but many other persons' things have gone missing just like before. If such incidents continue to happen in the society, it will tarnish its reputation. Now, after hearing Monica's complaint, the society management takes this matter seriously and begins an investigation. It is then found out that only Rajkumar used to open Monica's car for cleaning, besides Monica herself. After that, a search is conducted in the guard room where Rajkumar used to stay, and Monica's umbrella is also recovered from there. Now, since thefts were already a concern in society, after Monica's umbrella is found, suspicion falls entirely on Rajkumar. As a result, on July 22, 2016, Rajkumar is dismissed from his job on theft charges. From here, the story takes a new turn. While Rajkumar had deeply loved Monica before, now he starts to harbor a significant amount of hatred towards her. However, after being dismissed from his job, Rajkumar leaves and starts working as a laborer in the Ponda area of Goa. But even there, he only works for a few days. During this time, he meets Monica twice and asks her to withdraw the theft complaint, but Monica flatly refuses. Now, hearing this, Rajkumar gets even angrier, but he couldn't do anything at that moment. After that, Rajkumar arrives in Chennai in search of a job, then goes to Mumbai from there, and finally spends some time working in Pune city. Everywhere, Rajkumar earns his living by doing odd jobs, but when he doesn't find any decent job anywhere, he returns to Goa on the 2nd of October 2016. But this time, he had something planned in Goa. There was still a lot of hatred against Monica in his mind. The very next day, that is, on the 3rd of October in the afternoon, Rajkumar reaches Sapnaraj Valley again. He enters the society through the main gate, and by chance, no one sees him entering. Then he goes straight to Monica's apartment below, but he notices that Monica's car is not parked there. Seeing this, he understands that Monica is not at home at the moment. However, instead of leaving from there, Rajkumar decides to wait for Monica to arrive in the society. Now, because Rajkumar knows every route in the society, he decides to hide on the terrace of the society because, generally, no one comes to the terrace. Meanwhile, Rajkumar keeps looking down repeatedly and checks Monica's car, but even after the whole October 3rd passes, Monica's car is not seen. Then the next day, October 4th comes, but Monica's car still doesn't show up, and then October 4th also passes. On October 5th, Monica's car was checked several times by Rajkumar since morning, but it wasn't seen. Now, it had been almost 2 days since he stayed on the terrace. There was neither food to eat nor anything to drink on the terrace during this time. Many times, Rajkumar felt like leaving from there. But the fire of revenge didn't let him go, and fueled by this vengeance, Rajkumar spent more than 48 hours hungry and thirsty on the terrace. Around 3 to 3:30 p.m. on October 5th, 2016, Rajkumar came down once again, and this time he saw Monica's car parked. This meant that Monica had returned home. Seeing this, there was a strange smile on Rajkumar's face, but then he went back to the terrace and started waiting for darkness. After that, he comes downstairs around 6:30 in the evening and rings Monica's flat doorbell. When Monica asks who, Rajkumar identifies himself as a security supervisor. Hearing this, Monica opens the door, but as soon as she does, Rajkumar forcefully pushes her and then shuts the door from inside. Before Monica can comprehend anything, Rajkumar takes out a knife from his pocket and warns her, "If you make noise, I'll stab you." Still, Monica screams loudly to protect herself, but Rajkumar covers her mouth with his hand. Then Rajkumar takes Monica to the bathroom, intimidating and controlling her. After that, he forcefully takes Monica to the bedroom at knife point, lays her on the bed, ties both her hands behind the bed first, then ties both her legs as well. Now, Rajkumar demands money from Monica at knife point. Upon seeing herself trapped, Monica also gets very nervous, so she tells the Rajkumar, "Take all the money in the purse." After that, the Rajkumar empties Monica's entire purse. About 4,000 Indian rupees come out of the purse, like $48. But the Rajkumar's desire is not satisfied with that, and he asks Monica for more money. So Monica says, "I only have this much money right now. If you need more money, I have a debit card. Take it and withdraw money from the ATM." The Rajkumar didn't know how to use a debit card. Still, he learns from Monica how to use it. So, systematically, Monica tells him the way to withdraw money, how to insert the card into the ATM machine, then select the language, and then how to enter the secret PIN. And along with that, she also tells him her debit card's PIN number. I think, maybe in that situation, Monica feels that now Rajkumar will leave her and go from here. Then she will complain to the police and Rajkumar will be caught through the location of the debit card. But Rajkumar takes the money and card and puts a cloth in Monica's mouth. After doing all this, he now knew that Monica could not do anything, so he leaves from there with great confidence and then goes to the kitchen. He takes out water from the fridge, boils the eggs, eats them with great ease, and there was no hurry for him. He was eating and drinking with great comfort because he knew that Monica lived alone in that flat. Now, he also takes out ice cream from the fridge and eats it. Besides, he also eats chocolate, meaning that all the hunger and thirst he had been suffering for 2 days on the terrace is satisfied now. It was around 12 o'clock at night by all this. When his stomach is full again, he returns to Monica. He takes her phone, although it was locked, but Rajkumar's unlock it by forcing Monica. Then Rajkumar opens an adult site on her phone and forcibly shows her 3 adult videos. Feeling all this, Monica becomes even more anxious because she realized that Rajkumar was not going to let her go now. Then Rajkumar unties the rope from Monica's legs and removes all the clothes from her waist down. Then he fulfills his desire that had been in his mind since the first day he saw Monica. It was nearly 2 a.m. in the morning by now, and Rajkumar had been in Monica's apartment for almost 8 hours when Rajkumar's desire was filled. He gets nervous for the first time when the question arises in his mind whether Monica knows him well, and if he leaves Monica alive, she will tell the police about it, and then the Rajkumar will be punished. So the prince lifted a pillow from the same bed and began to suffocate Monica's mouth and kept pressing until she died. Then the Rajkumar got up from there comfortably and went to the bathroom again. After that, Rajkumar shaved his beard, then he bathed, and at 3:30 a.m. on October 6, 2016, in the darkness, he sneaked out of the Sapna Valley stealthily. Then at 6 a.m., after withdrawing money from the ATM, he went to Bangalore, where the police arrested him. After hearing the entire story, all the police officers were quite surprised. After that, the Goa police gathers all the evidence against Rajkumar. Then, on January 6, 2017, a 228-page charge sheet is present in court, charging murder, rape, and robbery. However, the trial of this case is still ongoing. Let's see when the criminal will be punished. If there is any update in this case, we will update you through the channel's community post. So friends, this was the complete story of the Monica Gerd murder case. If you appreciate our efforts, like and share this video. If you haven't subscribed, do so now. Thank you.